Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Jujutsu Kaisen. The Snow Woman wife at the beginning is so beautiful. Chapter 81. Familiar stage of manipulation. How to say. Yatoshin is the type without clothes, everything about her is covered with scales. Lan Shuyan fell into deep thought while holding Yatoshin's snake tail. After all, it seems that there is nothing to see in the extremely simple body full of scales. Forget it. Anyway, Lan Shuyan just wants Yatoshin's snake lady appearance. Other things are not important at all. As the saying goes, one step back will open up a wider world, and playing is not playing. So Lan Shuyan sat directly on the chair and waved to Yatoshin. Yatoshin was still quite afraid of Lan Shuyan, and now she was a Shikigami, and there was no way to disobey, because she was different from Yatsuki. Yatsuki's Shikigami restraints were restraints with a large range of freedom. And Yatoshin was also a Shikigami restraint that obeyed orders 100%. Sliding his tail, Yatoshin came in front of Lan Shuyan. Lan Shuyan grinned, and then whispered something in Yatoshin's ear. Yatoshin didn't understand, but she didn't dare to ask, she was just a cursed spirit born in June. So just do what Lan Shuyan said. The face was grinning, and the red lips, which were originally smaller than those of ordinary people, began to split from the corners of the mouth and spread directly to the ears. It was as exaggerated as a snake's mouth. Then it approached Lan Shuyan and spit out its tongue like a snake. It must have a strong suction force like a plunger in the toilet, and it must be a very good experience. Brother Kun is blessed tonight. Then, suddenly, Lan Shuyan, who was looking forward to it, suddenly felt a pain in his stomach. The approaching Night Blade God also stopped. Blood began to flow from Lan Shuyan's stomach. Lan Shuyan looked down and fell silent. The Night Blade God's eyes were flustered. He retracted his head and retreated, hiding his body with his snake tail, only showing his little head and looking at Lan Shuyan from the gap. The baby is afraid. The baby is trembling. Lan Shuyan was speechless, because when the Night Blade God poked his head over just now, the horn on his forehead directly pierced his stomach. So, why didn't I think of this? I let her grow horns just because I want to grab her horns, so that I can have that kind of feeling, and the existence of Yatogami already has a horn on its forehead. Lan Shuyan's mouth twitched violently. He looked at Yatogami, who was shivering with his body wrapped in a snake, and his little head was sticking out of the gap and looking at him timidly. Forget it. She didn't mean it. Look how scared she made me. However, to Lan Shuyan's surprise, Qingshan Shuiji actually appeared. She floated in front of Yatogami and squatted down to face Yatogami. Qingshan Shuiji squinted her eyes, and a gentle smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. Her expression was as gentle as it could be. But the cold air coming out of her body instantly covered the surroundings with frost. Lan Shuyan shuddered all over. Why did he feel the murderous intent? But it didn't seem to be directed at me. Qingshan Shuiji stood up, and with her slender fingers, she grasped the corner of Yi Daoshan's forehead, and then pulled the trembling Yi Daoshan towards Lan Shuyan. This made Lan Shuyan stunned for a moment. No way, no way. Is Miss Qingshan going to teach Yi Daoshan herself? Should I refuse? I still have to refuse. But, then Qingshan Shuiji turned into a white light and returned to the realm of life on the back of Lan Shuyan's hand, and Yi Daoshan also entered. Lan Shuyan's face was full of question marks. No. What am I expecting? No, you should have taken her back. How can I expect it? Before Lan Shuyan could ask anything to the back of his hand, Lan Shuyan Yan suddenly saw something thrown out from the back of her hand, and when she looked to the side, it was Hua Yu. She was also confused at this moment. She had obviously had a lot of fun playing with Yatsuki in the realm of life just now, and she also liked Yatsuki, the jellyfish, but while playing, she suddenly felt that someone grabbed the back of her neck, and then she was thrown out. She tilted her head, blinking her green eyes that seemed to make people feel pity, and looked at Lan Shuyan. Then she lowered her head slightly, and her feet in flat shoes were intertwined and buckled in it. Lan Shuyan sighed. He understood what Qingshan Shuiji meant. What it meant was, Night Sword God, I will help you to adjust, help you to teach him a lesson for a moment. You should use Hua Yu to deal with the emergency first. Okay. Lan Shuyan could only raise his palm, and a light of positive energy appeared, and then he pressed it on his stomach, and the wound healed quickly. Then he stood up with a smile and walked to Hua Yu, then pulled her towards the bed, and whispered something in her ear. After that, Lan Shuyan asked Hua Yu to sit down and took off her shoes. Hua Yu looked at her feet. She remembered that Lan Shuyan was holding her feet and chewing them in the car just now. Then Lan Shuyan lay on the bed one by one. Hua Yu tilted her head and stretched out her feet. Then came the more foot-wasting part. Chinese teacher, where are the details? Math teacher, where is the process? English teacher, where is the pronunciation? Geography teacher, where is the location? Painting teacher, where is the picture? Chemistry teacher, where is the reaction? Dance teacher, where is the movement? Biology teacher, where is the child? Humble author, a mysterious existence will not let. The next day, Lan Shuyan opened his eyes and put on his glasses, and saw Hua Yu, who was holding her head high in his arms, looking at Lan Shuyan with her smart and charming eyes. Hua Yu is really well behaved and doesn't like to talk much. She really has the feeling of a shy and quiet model student. To be more precise, she should be the kind of white moonlight that most boys have in their ignorant minds. She will listen to you and follow your wishes, and will satisfy you in everything. And she won't bother you, but will quietly stay by your side and watch you. It's just that we were a little crazy when we did that. Last night was 2 hours again. In the first half hour, Lan Shuyan was the only one in the world, and in the second hour and a half, Hua Yu said that I was the only one in the world. Good morning. Lan Shuyan touched Hua Yu's cheek. Good morning. Hua Yu squinted her eyes, her lips were still tight, and her voice echoed directly in Lan Shuyan's mind. Lan Shuyan got up and carried Hua Yu to the bathroom. After washing up, she had already changed into a new high school uniform. Hua Yu also used her magic power to restore her clothes. She stood aside and watched Lan Shuyan obediently. Go back and rest, Hua Yu. Lan Shuyan stretched out his hand, and Hua Yu turned into a green light and returned to the realm of life. But when he retracted his palm, Lan Shuyan paused for a moment. Then he frowned and looked at the back of his hand thoughtfully. On the back of his left hand was the seal of transformation without action, and on the back of his right hand was the realm of life of Qingshan Shuiji. By the way, I still don't know what Miss Qingshan's technique is. Moreover, I had never thought about why there was a life field in my right hand. Lan Shuyan thought about it. Then he shook his head. He looked at the time, it was 9 o'clock. Unlike sleeping with Qingshan Shuiji, which would wake him up from the cold, sleeping with Hua Yu was really comfortable. The smell on her body had a calming effect, and it felt like being in nature. He left the room and went to the cafeteria. Qingshan Shuiji hadn't come out to prepare breakfast for him in the past 2 days. She seemed to know how to spoil a man and would never bother Lan Shuyan. So, Lan Shuyan casually took out Wuzhong pickled mustard and Weimao pickled mustard from the cafeteria's refrigerator. Then he started to make porridge for himself. Half an hour later, he started to heat up the porridge and eat it with side dishes. I'm running out of pickled mustard tubers and salted vegetables. I need to ask China to send some to me. Itadori and the others are really good at it. Lan Shuyan cleaned up the dishes and walked towards the classroom. What? Why is there a classroom? Because they are all students. Basically, when there is no mission, students gather in the classroom. However, when he just arrived in the classroom, Lan Shuyan was stunned for a moment, because Fushiguro Megumi had returned, and she was with Fushiguro Miki. Fushiguro Miki was wearing a white shirt, a black 8-point long skirt, flat shoes, and her hair was disheveled. Although she had been in a coma, her body was growing and her figure was pretty good. Kugasaki Nobara was talking to Fushiguro Miki very well. Itadori. Yujin was talking to Fushiguro Megumi about everything. But when Fushiguro Megumi saw Lan Shuyan speak, she immediately stood up. Seeing Fushiguro Megumi stand up, Fushiguro Miki also stood up. She looked at Lan Shuyan and looked at him carefully. Lan Shuyan was also looking at Fushiguro Miki. She had just woken up last night and had been lying in bed for so long, but she could move immediately. Isn't this a little unlikely? Sue Miki, this is the person who helped you, my classmate, Lan Shuyan. Fushiguro Megumi introduced Lan Shuyan. Hello, Mr. Lan, thank you for saving me. Fushiguro Sumeji bowed in a standard manner, and her voice was exactly the same as Yadogami's, belonging to Sister Sori, but Yadogami's was weak, while Fushiguro Sumeji's was gentle. Fushiguro Megumi was the same. This made Lan Shuyan pull them up directly. No need to thank me. Lan Shuyan said, still thinking whether he should let Fushiguro Wei pay attention to it and let Fushiguro Miki stay away from him. Fushiguro, come, let's have a private chat. Although Fushiguro Megumi's sister Fushiguro Miki is very beautiful, Lan Shuyan really has no interest in her. But just when Lan Shuyan went to pull Fushiguro Megumi, Lan Shuyan paused for a moment, then walked directly to Fushiguro Miki, lowered his head and looked at Fushiguro Miki's face. This made Fushiguro Miki retreat tactically, but did not distance herself, just turned her head, and her cheeks were a little red. Fushiguro Megumi was stunned for a moment, and then the corner of her mouth twitched violently. Lan Shuyan, didn't you declare that you are not interested in girls with human carbon-based life? Fushiguro Megumi is not a sister control, nor does he love his sister. He just respects this sister, who has been very strict with him since he was a child, but also very gentle. Fushiguro Megumi was about to go over and pull Lan Shuyan away, but Lan Shuyan raised his hand to stop him. Then he surrounded the uneasy Fushiguro Miki and looked at her. Fushiguro Miki was very nervous. Although she was precocious, she still stayed at the age of the 3rd grade. She grabbed her skirt with her palms and her face was flushed. After all, no matter what, Lan Shuyan is considered a handsome guy. Strangeness. It was normal when I touched your sister's soul last night. But I just saw that there seemed to be another existence in your sister's soul. Lan Shuyan retracted his gaze. And Lan Shuyan's words undoubtedly made Fushiguro Megumi nervous. Little sister Sumiki, can you sit down? I need to check your soul again. Lan Shuyan looked at Fushiguro Sumiki. It was not wrong to call her Miss Sumiki, because she was the oldest among the people here. Although Fushiguro and Yuji Itadori are both over 1.7 meters tall now, they are only 15 years old. Kugasaki Nobara is also younger than him, now she is 16 years old. Although Fushiguro Sumiki is older than Fushiguro Megumi, she is definitely less than 20 years old. Oh, I see. Although Fushiguro Miki was puzzled, she still sat down on the chair. Lan Shuyan looked around. He had just had some excitement last night, and now was the sage time. What 7 emotions and 6 desires should he use to transform into positive energy? Dianyu, Lan Shuyan called out. Then the cute little Dianyu appeared in a flash of blue light. Her body was shaking, and she stretched out her hands to hold Lan Shuyan's neck. The tentacles under the jellyfish cover wrapped around Lan Shuyan's body, and her cute face rubbed Lan Shuyan's cheek with a childlike smile. Dianyu is now a cute little girl who can be used as a pillow. Kawaii. This kid is so cute. When Fushiguro Miki saw Yatsuki, her girlish heart instantly burst out, and she ran directly behind Lan Shuyan and pulled Yatsuki down and hugged her in her arms. This made Yatsuki puff her mouth directly, and her tentacles wrapped around Lan Shuyan's waist even tighter. Cute. Yuji Itadori and Nobara Kugasaki looked at each other. Is Yodatsuki cute? It seems, maybe. No, that's not right. Why can Fushiguro Sumiki see cursed spirits? Fushiguro Megumi and Fushiguro Sumiki are not real siblings, and Fushiguro Sumiki couldn't see cursed spirits before. Lan Shuyan touched his chin with one hand and stood there thinking. Then he turned around and took the struggling Yatsuki back from Fushiguro Sumiki's arms. This made Yatsuki curl up his body and try to arch into Lan Shuyan's arms, and his tentacles were also moving restlessly. Oh no, I was touched. No, this is better, the source of positive energy is here. Hey, let me hug this child again. Fushiguro Miki really likes Yojuki, she is so cute with her sparkling body. This is a Shikigami, or a cursed spirit. You shouldn't be able to see it because the cursed power in your body is not enough to support you to see the cursed spirit. This is a serious problem. There is another existence in your soul. It should be triggered by your physical actions after you wake up. So, now please sit down. To be honest, Lan Shuyan doesn't know how to get along with normal girls. Fushiguro Miki reacted and bowed hurriedly. Sorry, I was too excited. After saying that, Fushiguro Miki returned to her chair and sat down again. Lan Shuyan also turned around, put his left palm on Fushiguro Miki's head and closed his eyes. 3 minutes later, Lan Shuyan suddenly opened his eyes. There's no way, it's a cursed object. She swallowed the cursed object just like Yuji. Lan Shuyan looked at Fushiguro Megumi. A recipient body like Fushiguro Miki, who was marked by the noose as a soul carrier, must have been fed a specific cursed object when it was marked. If you think about it carefully, it makes sense. Otherwise, when the noose launched the death and annihilation journey later, how could the various souls accurately find the recipient bodies prepared by the noose? There must be a cursed object for signing a contract to attract them. With a specific cursed object in the body, and the recipient's soul asleep, the soul that possesses the recipient can use the body without hindrance. When the cursed object is swallowed into the body, it will merge into the flesh and blood. The soul will fall asleep directly, making it easier for other souls to enter. It is really controlled from the inside out by the body. So, what effect will this have on Fushiguro Miki? Fushiguro Megumi was anxious. He understood the idea of swallowing a cursed object. There is no problem, because her soul has been restored to the body. Now I am afraid that the soul of the owner of the cursed object that your sister took off will be summoned and compete with your sister's soul for the body. Lan Shuyan guessed that what Fushiguro Miki swallowed should be a cursed object made from some part of the body of Miss Wan, after her death. Just like Ryomen Sukuna's body was made into 20 special grade cursed objects after his death. Sigh. Lan Shuyan has been thinking about how to explain the Death Annihilation Return to Gojo Satoru and the others. Gojo Satoru already knows about the Shibuya plan, but they don't know about the subsequent Death Annihilation Return. Why hesitate? Because Lan Shuyan is not sure whether Geto Suguru controlled by Nose can launch the Death Annihilation Return without a real person's technique. You're not going to be able to travel. But normally it should be possible. Otherwise, how could Nozomi know 1,000 years ago that a cursed spirit like Genrin would appear? Could it be that such a technique for Genrin existed 1,000 years ago? This is still possible. After all, after the cursed spirit dies, it will be reincarnated. Otherwise, in the original book, after being cooked by the old man, Luhu said goodbye to Hanami and Togen in the blank world. I just don't know if the technique is still the same after reincarnation. And putting these aside, even if Genrin didn't appear, he should still be able to use an ability similar to Inaction Transformation to trigger the start of Death and Return. Fushiguro Megumi frowned at Lan Shuyan, his heart beating fast. Although Lan Shuyan said there was no problem, he was really worried about that soul. Lan Shuyan came back to his senses and ignored Fushiguro Megumi. For now, in order to ensure that Sukuna cannot carry out his idea, the only way is to keep Fushiguro Megumi and Fushiguro Miki away from Itadori Yuji, or in other words, away from Japan. No, Lan Shuyan suddenly widened his eyes and grinned. If he couldn't solve the follow-up, he would solve the origin. Yuji, I want to put you in a bind and I need your consent. Lan Shuyan looked at Yuji Itadori with a smile. This smile made Yuji Itadori jump up from his chair immediately and move away from Lan Shuyan. Because at this moment, the smile on Lan Shuyan's face was extremely evil. No matter how he looked at Yuji Itadori, it didn't look like a good thing. Lan, yes, if you have something to say, just say it, don't smile like that. I am of normal orientation. You shouldn't at least. No, you can't think like that. Yuji Itadori is very experienced with this smile. That's the smile that Lan Shuyan would show to the cursed spirit lady. Lan Shuyan's smile suddenly froze, and his face was full of black lines. I didn't, don't talk nonsense. Lan Shuyan really wanted to do a Thomas turn on Yuji Itadori. But Lan Shuyan suddenly remembered something. He looked towards Fushiguro Megumi. Then he took out his cell phone. Hello, teacher, where are you? Well, okay, I'll ask Fushiguro to come find you. I'll send you a message later, take a look. Lan Shuyan hung up the phone and started sending messages on his phone. Fushiguro, go find the teacher now, he's in the dormitory. Lan Shuyan looked at Fushiguro Wei. Why? Fushiguro Megumi was confused. Don't ask, go now. Lan Shuyan put away his phone. Fushiguro Megumi was puzzled, but left directly. 3 minutes later, Lan Shuyan received a message from Gojo Satoru on his phone, then he grinned and looked at Itadori Yuji. Let's get down to business. I need you to sign a bond with yourself. Afterwards, just in case, please sign a bond with me. Come closer and listen. Lan Shuyan waved to Yuji Itadori. This made Yuji Itadori stunned for a moment, but he still walked to Lan Shuyan obediently, and Lan Shuyan leaned over to Yuji Itadori and whispered something in his ear. Yuji Itadori thought for a moment, then nodded. Then, Yuji Itadori closed his eyes and began to try to sign a bond with himself according to Lan Shuyan's instructions. Not long after, Yuji Itadori opened his eyes. Did it work? I saw your soul was bound by something for a moment, and it seemed to have bound Sukuna's soul as well. Lan Shuyan's eyes can see souls, so he can clearly see. Well, it worked. Yuji Itadori nodded, his expression very serious. Then, Lan Shuyan approached Yuji Itadori's ear again. Yuji Itadori continued to nod. Okay, I'll sign a bond with you. Yuji Itadori smiled brightly. He trusted Lan Shuyan unconditionally and extended his hand to Lan Shuyan. Then, the bondage established. Lan Shuyan stretched out his hand, and the two of them held their hands together. The bondage contract with others has been established. Both of them can feel that their souls seem to be shackled. Little devil. At this moment, Sukuna's mouth suddenly appeared on Yuji Itadori's face, and his voice was very cold. Look, you are anxious. I know you are anxious, but please don't be anxious. Lan Shuyan responded to Sukuna's cold words with a smile. Guess what kind of constraints Yuji has set for himself. And guess what kind of constraints the protagonist and Yuji have set. At this time, Sukuna, who was born in Yuji's body, had a cold face. How did that guy know the bond I signed with this kid? Sukuna would never get angry, because he looked down on everyone and did whatever he wanted. But now it really made Sukuna grit his teeth. The restraints that Lan Shuyan and Itadori Yuji just now directly blocked the restraints between him and Itadori Yuji. And the subsequent restraints of others were a fundamental countermeasure against him. Because of the synchronization, Sukuna knew what Lan Shuyan and Itadori Yuji said just now. He had the idea of shouting, Chi Kuo, at that moment just now, but then gave up because the condition of the restraint was not to hurt others. In addition, Lan Shuyan was present, and Fushiguro Megumi was with Gojo Satoru, so he was really not sure. Why does Yuji-kun have two mouths? As for Fushiguro Miki, she only knew that her brother and his friends were sorcerers, but she didn't know what was going on. I forgot about you. Lan Shuyan ignored the mouth that Sukuna had on Yuji Itadori's face. He turned around and looked at Fushiguro Miki. I will transform your soul and make it resonate with the soul of the cursed creature you swallowed, so that it will become yours and you don't have to worry about the future. But this process may take a long time. So you have to stay in the Jujutsu High School, is that okay? I believe the teacher will agree. Lan Shuyan looked at Fushiguro Miki seriously. This made Fushiguro Miki tilt her head, revealing an extremely cheerful smile and nodding. Not long after, Gojo Satoru came back with Fushiguro Megumi. At this time, Fushiguro Megumi was still a little confused. Lan Shuyan also briefly explained the situation, but only mentioned the restraints with Yuji Itadori, and did not reveal what they were. In other words, Sukuna has set his sights on Wei. After hearing this, Gojo Satoru found it a little unbelievable. Even Fushiguro Wei himself was a little confused. This is true. If that were not the case, why didn't Sukuna kill Fushiguro directly? He must have been attracted by Fushiguro's jutsu and Makoro. Lan Shuyan decided to tell Sukuna's purpose. Of course. At this time, Yuji Itadori had been thrown out, and he was told to stay wherever he wanted. It is estimated that Yuji Itadori is drawing circles in a remote place, and Yatsuki is patting his head to comfort him. I just don't know if Yuji Itadori will be stung. It's okay if he is stung. After all, Yuji Itadori is resistant to poison. Why let Yatsuki go out as well? Because Yatsuki also has a Sukuna finger on his head. According to what Lan said, when Sukuna controlled Yuji Itadori, his attitude towards me was very strange. And Sukuna also said, let me fall in love with you, Fushiguro Megumi. Fushiguro Megumi also spoke. Gojo Satoru also became thoughtful. As the representative of the Gojo family, Gojo Satoru knew the ability of the 10 Shadows curse, especially the existence of Makoro. But he was also puzzled as to why Lan Shuyan knew about Makoro. So, how did you know that Yuji Itadori and Sukuna were bound together? Gojo Satoru shook his head. Anyway, Lan Shuyan had always shown that he knew a lot about many things, so he didn't ask any more questions. So he asked the question that he was more concerned about now. Yuji Itadori should have forgotten about the bondage, so how did Lan Shuyan know about it? Miss Qingshan told me that he can see souls, can see restraints, and can tell what the conditions of restraints are. Lan Shuyan responded without blushing or beating his heart. Qingshan Shuiji. So that's it. Indeed. From the records, Qingshan Shuiji can indeed see other people's souls and constraints. Gojo Satoru nodded. This is true. Except for the constraints of basic techniques and dream power at the beginning, Qingshan Shuiji only needs to look at Lan Shuyan's body to clearly see what kind of constraints Lan Shuyan used the mirror image to make, and there is no need to ask at all. What? Why did you ask about the Wu-Wei transformation? Because Qingshan Shuiji didn't open her eyes that time. Moreover, Qingshan Shuiji can only see Lan Shuyan's soul constraints, and can't see the soul constraints of anyone other than Lan Shuyan. Well, let's leave it like this for now. The restraints set by Yujin himself can indeed prevent this situation, and the restraints set with you also have secondary insurance. How about I also make a mutual bond with Yujin like you, Lan? Gojo Satoru touched his chin and grinned. This is acceptable. Otherwise, why not everyone just make a bond with Hisahito? Especially Fushiguro. I suddenly thought of a bondage that would be suitable for you and Yujin. I just don't know if this constraint can be established. As long as your soul loses control of your body, your technique will be transferred to Yuji, and you will gain Yuji's physical abilities and Yuji's cursed power. Lan Shuyan grinned at Fushiguro Megumi. It's not known whether this kind of mutual restraint is sufficient. After all, the technique is innate and engraved in the brain. Lan Shuyan's words stunned Gojo Satoru and everyone else. What kind of brain circuit is Lan Shuyan? Why can he come up with so many fancy uses for restraint? It's outrageous, isn't it? It should be unlikely. The benefits and costs of Wei are not equal. Wei provided the technique, while Yujin only provided his own cursed power and physical abilities. Gojo Satoru shook his head, indicating that this bond was not valid. That's right. The equivalent is different. Lan Shuyan shrugged helplessly. If it was really possible to bind like this, then Sukuna would definitely be furious. The body of Fushiguro Megumi is just an empty box. And it's actually useless to do so, because Sukuna can just make Fushiguro Megumi's finger into a cursed object and let Yuji Itadori swallow it. Here are some other ideas that may help you strengthen your spell output limit and spell limit. Teacher, please help listen and see if it works. Lan Shuyan did not forget what he was going to say to Kugasaki Nobara and Fushiguro Megumi today. Tell me about it. Gojo Satoru nodded. He actually admired Lan Shuyan's various restraint operations. Kugasaki, how do you think your fighting ability is? Lan Shuyan looked at Kugasaki Wild Rose. His physical skills are not as good as Yuji, and his skills are not as good as Fushiguro. However, after performing the Black Flash that day, I found that I understood more about the cursed power and felt more. Nobara Kugasaki clenched her fist and looked at her fist. When they were fighting last night, Nobara Kugasaki actually performed the Black Flash and understood the true taste of the cursed power. Do you want to try bondage? Give up the hammer and nails, give up the conditions of close combat, and be restricted to using only thermal weapons for long-range attacks to increase your own spell power output and the effectiveness of your spells. If you are crazy enough, you can even sign a contract that you can feel the pain of the enemy you attack as a condition to continue to increase the output of spell power and the effect of the spell. After all, in my opinion, your close combat skills are not even as good as mine when I am still a normal person. Lan Shuyan did not mean to insult Nobara Kugasaki. It was that Nobara Kugasaki's current physical skills were not as good as his as an ordinary person. Nobara Kugasaki did not respond, nor did she deny it. She knew that what Lan Shuyan said was correct. I see. Using guns as hammers, bullets as nails, and setting conditions, can the output limit of Wild Rose's mantra and the effect of the Chu Ling mantra be increased? Gojo Satoru also began to think about it. It is still very effective to restrain oneself, and there is no need to worry about the cost, because the contract signed with oneself is for oneself. This is different from the bondage between Lan Shuyan and the mirror image. The bondage between Lan Shuyan and the mirror image is more like a bondage signed with others. And the mirror image is Lan Shuyan's own, so it doesn't matter what price the mirror image pays. This kind of bondage without any cost to oneself can only be played by Lan Shuyan, and other people can't achieve it at all. Yes, it can even add the constraints of distance to the enemy, and resonance damage and pain. The closer you are to the enemy, the stronger the spell output and spell effects you gain. The price you pay is that you cannot come into contact with the enemy, otherwise your spell will become ineffective and the contact will disappear before the spell is restored. Yes, it can even add the constraints of distance to enemy, and resonance damage and pain. The closer you are to the enemy, the stronger the spell power output and spell effects you get. The price you pay is that you cannot physically touch the enemy, otherwise your spell power and spell effects will become ineffective. The spell power and spell effects will only be restored when the contact disappears. The resonance of enemy pain is to endure the same pain of the opponent to increase your own cursed power output and the effect of the spell in order to gain benefits, and of course the price you pay is that your body can resonate with the pain of the enemy you attack. Lan Shuyan snapped his fingers, then pointed at Kugasaki Nobara. Sbarasi. Sure enough. Lan, you are really a genius at playing with restraints. This restraint is completely valid, the cost and benefit are very equal, and it cleverly avoids the restrictions of restraints. Gojo Satoru really admires Lan Shuyan's ideas. Is this the various novel ideas of modern authors? What do you mean? Avoided the restrictions of restraints. Kugisaki Nobara looked at Gojo Satoru with some doubts. She was actually very tempted because she knew that she was very weak now. What if you're in physical combat with an enemy and lose your spell, but then suddenly you're not physically in contact with the enemy and you attack directly with your pistol? How will that work? And the restraint is that your body cannot come into contact with the enemy. So what about putting on long pants, long sleeves, boots, and gloves? And a bodysuit underneath for safety. In this way, your body will not come into contact with the enemy. Your spell power and your technique are still there. Just be careful not to let your neck and face come into contact with the enemy. This will only make you feel a little uncomfortable in summer, and even if your clothes are damaged during the battle, you still have the distance limit to increase your mana output and the effectiveness of your spells. Lan Shuyan pointed at Kugasaki Nobara. This made Kugasaki Nobara stunned. Can you still play like this? Although there are uncertainties of flaws, the benefits gained are definitely worth it. Even if the condition of physical contact cannot be achieved, it doesn't matter, there is still the improvement of mana output and the effectiveness of spells, at least this level is better than her current level. You can try it. I'm very excited. Kugisaki Nobara grinned and showed a crazy smile. To be honest, everyone who practices magic is crazy. And Fushiguro Megumi was also stunned. Has this guy really just started to get involved in the magic world? How can he understand everything so easily? It's outrageous. Fushiguro, the next one is yours. How about giving up the idea of summoning the Shikigami and letting their characteristics act on you? It's similar to letting the Shikigami possess you to gain the characteristics of this Shikigami, and you have the spell tool library of the Zen Temple Senior, which can be used in conjunction with melee combat. If you want to materialize a Shikigami, you cannot attach the characteristics of the Shikigami to yourself, and you can only merge all the Shikigami into one. You can do this, after all, your Shikigami can be inherited by other Shikigami after death. This way, your Shikigami cannot be separated later, so you can also release the materialization and restore the Shikigami's restraint on your body. But the premise of all this is that you have enough magic power to summon more Shikigami. So, use your current killer weapon, Moxu Luo, to make it impossible to summon, and if you summon yourself, you will die, which will increase your spell power, and then set a binding doll that cannot change this binding. After nesting the dolls, perhaps you can get more benefits from the binding. Lan Shuyan pointed at Fushiguro Megumi. Fushiguro Megumi was confused, but he quickly started thinking. Because Mokuro is the last trump card, this guy is not like other Shikigami. Among Fushiguro Megumi's Shikigami, except for the one that he can't summon because of insufficient mana, the others can be summoned from the shadow and materialized as long as he learns how to control them, and they are very obedient. But Mokuro does not need a lot of mana to summon, only a little mana can be summoned, but it is not controlled by him. If he wants to control it, Fushiguro Megumi can only fight with Mokuro himself, and kill it once before he can summon it again and control it. Because Mokuro will be reformed in the shadow world, But if it is called out and failed to be subdued, the summoner will be killed by Mokuro, unless someone intervenes to help the summoner solve Mokuro. Quote, quote. Fushiguro Megumi was silent. Actually, every time he felt that he couldn't win, he wanted to call Bulubu Yura Yura, in order to summon the 8 gripped swords, the divine general of the rings, Makura. This was a summoning of a divine general to perish together with the enemy. I understand. It means that you cannot summon, not that you cannot summon. Summoning will cost you instant death. Lan Shuyan stretched out his hand and tapped the desk with his fingers. This made Fushiguro Megumi stunned for a moment, and then the corner of his mouth twitched. Are you playing so hard? The premise for me to summon Moxu Luo is that I have nowhere else to go and my life is no longer important, because I will die after Moxu Luo kills the enemy who is performing the ritual. It seems, this has no conflict with the fixed or unfixed binding. Fushiguro Wei is really speechless. How could this guy think of so many binding bugs? He can't summon Mokuro, and Mokuro is very strong, so the curse power that can be obtained from the equivalent must be very optimistic. Ha ha ha, as expected, Lan, you are such a talent. Gojo Satoru laughed out loud, he really thought Lan Shuyan was ridiculous. Curse masters need imagination, but Lan Shuyan is the only one whose imagination is so speechless, he is trying hard to get the wool while wearing the restraints. Lan Shuyan smiled and said nothing. In fact, Gojo Satoru and the others did not notice another trap. And this trap is used to trap Sukuna. If the 2 restraints that were bound by Yuji Itadori before were ineffective, and Sukuna still took over the Fushiguro Megumi unit, then he used the magic hollow without knowing it, and Fushiguro Megumi's body would be instantly dead. And if Fushiguro Megumi, who is the container, died, Sukuna should also die. After experiencing countless restraints, Lan Shuyan knows very well what the deprivation cost of restraints is. Although it has many bugs that can be stuck, once it is violated, it will immediately be deprived of the price set by the restraints. So, the last nesting doll restraint, there is no solution. Even Sukuna is the king of loans. Yo, you can definitely try it. As Lan said just now, whether it is Wild Rose or Wei, your bondage is to use a fixed price to obtain the benefits that the bondage automatically gives you, rather than using fixed benefits and making you pay a price. Therefore, even if there is a difference, there will be no punishment, but the benefits obtained will be reduced. Next, I, the teacher, will help you complete the training after being restrained. Gojo Satoru stretched out his hands and pressed on the heads of Fushiguro Megumi and Kugasaki Nobara. Fushiguro Miki was arranged to live in the Su dormitory, and she needed Lan Shuyan to help her resonate the cursed object, Wan, that she swallowed with Fushiguro Miki's soul. After that, Lan Shuyan would use ritual reversal transformation without action, a little bit every day to synchronize the cursed object to Fushiguro Miki's soul. But Lan Shuyan did not tell Fushiguro Megumi that this process might turn Fushiguro Miki into an existence between the curse and the human. Time passed day by day. October 10th. Lan Shuyan has been helping Fushiguro Miki to resonate the cursed object in her body every day. Fortunately, this cursed object is not like Sukuna's finger, and there is no soul like Sukuna in it. The soul should be with Geto Suguru. So the resonance process was still very smooth. Thank you so much. Today is the last treatment. So Fushiguro Miki is very grateful to Lan Shuyan. The time spent together has also made her begin to understand Lan Shuyan. Lan Shuyan looked at Fushiguro Miki. In the past 12 days, Fushiguro Miki's appearance has changed a lot. There is a feeling that she overlaps with Miss Wan's appearance. Whether it is the face shape or the body shape, it looks very imperial, and it seems that Miss Wan's curse has affected her personality and she feels a little sick. The look in her eyes when she looks at Lan Shuyan is very strange. And, how to say it, at this moment, Fushiguro Miki is squinting her eyes, grinning sickly, and the key is that she is covering her skirt with her hands. It is really what the great poet Li said, the water of the yellow river comes from the sky. Lan Shuyan's mouth twitched. It's outrageous. Lan Shuyan used spell reversal in action transformation to manipulate her soul and resonate the curse, and her body actually reacted. This is something Lan Shuyan did not expect. Now, Fushiguro Miki's eyes are almost full of love. But think about it. The use of the reversal of the art, transformation without action, can change the shape of the soul, and when the shape of the soul changes, the body will also change, so fundamentally, the soul and the body complement each other. What, Miss Fushiguro, I'm really not interested in human girls. You should have noticed after spending so many days together that I am surrounded by female cursed spirits. I don't understand. Lan Shuyan really doesn't understand. There is no process at all. It's really just that I saved you, touched your soul for a long time, and then you want to pledge your love to me, right? How do you say that? If it's a handsome guy, I can't repay you for saving my life, so I can only pledge my love to you, right? If it's not a handsome guy, I can't repay you for saving my life, so I can only work like a cow or a horse in the next life, right? I don't want this kind of bloody plot. Nai, Lan, you have made me weird, so you must be responsible for me. And I don't mind you turning me into a monster. Fushiguro Miki held her face directly, staring at Lan Shuyan with wide eyes, smiling very sickly. This made Lan Shuyan shiver, as if in the comics, Miss Wan was also very bold to express her love to the Fushiguro Megumi unit controlled by Sukuna. He actually started to think. It seems that it is not impossible. After all, now Fushiguro Miki is like being cursed by the flesh, but it is still the original Fushiguro Miki who controls the body. No, I was led astray by Fushiguro Miki. What do you mean I turned you into that? What does this have to do with me? I touched your soul, and my body was just pressed on your head. What does it have to do with me? Well, how about this? As Fushiguro Miki said this, she actually began to control her own cursed power and activated the construction technique, which began to condense liquid metal to wrap herself up, forming an insect girl. 4 mantis hands, with valves like the abdomen of an insect. See the short review for pictures. If there is no picture, it means it has not passed the review. Go to the organization album to see. This made Lan Shuyan's eyes widen. Although Lan Shuyan knew that Fushiguro Miki was already able to use Miss Wan's construction technique, she was able to use it so quickly. And it really was just poking at his fetish, right? Yandere is so scary. Your liking for Yandere is a story, but a Yandere liking you is an accident. Dong dong. At this moment, there was a knock on Lan Shuyan's door. This made Lan Shuyan look over, and then walked over to open the door. When he opened the door, it was Gojo Satoru. The restraints of Fushiguro Megumi and Kugasaki Nobara have been completed. During this period, Kugasaki Nobara and Fushiguro Megumi have been completely under Gojo Satoru's high-pressure training. Of course, Yuji Itadori is also receiving training. It's just that the training time is staggered with that of Fushiguro Megumi and Kugasaki Nobara. Logically speaking, Gojo Satoru should be helping Yuji Itadori with training now, and he shouldn't come here. Good evening, Lan. As he said that, Gojo Satoru looked inside the house. Then he was stunned for a moment, and then he directly put his arms around Lan Shuyan's neck. He saw that the female mantis was Fushiguro Miki. Lan Shuyan finally extended his evil hands to humans. Hey, Lan, you turned Hui's sister into this, aren't you afraid that Wei will come over and give you a Brubu Yura with her fist? Gojo Satoru really thought that if Fushiguro Megumi saw his sister's current state, he would really fight with Lan Shuyan. I didn't do it, don't talk nonsense. Lan Shuyan immediately denied it 3 times in a row. He won't take the blame. This is her own spell, not the effect of my spell reversal in action transformation. Her technique is the construction technique. Originally, I wanted to help her master it, and then let her help me create more effective cursed tools. Lan Shuyan originally had no purpose in helping Fushiguro Miki. It was simply to compensate Fushiguro Megumi for losing the opportunity to open a half-domain in practice. After all, Yadogami was taken away by him. But later, when he found out that there was a cursed item of Wan in Fushiguro Miki's body, he thought of Miss Wan, who was a cursed toolmaker 1,000 years ago, so he thought of letting Fushiguro Miki master this technique, and inherit the memories mixed in the Wan cursed item, and then let her help make some special grade cursed tools for him to use. Miss Wan's construction technique is very different from the construction technique of Zenin Maki's sister. The difference is as big as heaven and earth. Oh, Gojo Satoru was surprised to hear this. This time he took off his blindfold and looked carefully at Fushiguro Miki. It is indeed a construction technique, and the cursed power on the body has been greatly enhanced. It's comparable to a special grade cursed spirit. Sure enough, even if only cursed objects remain from 1,000 years ago, they are still very powerful. Gojo Satoru praised. So, what do you want to talk to me about? If you had nothing to do, you wouldn't have come here, right? Lan Shuyan rolled his eyes and asked directly. At this time, Gojo Satoru was no longer smiling, but looked at Lan Shuyan very seriously. Jia, no, it should be the noose you mentioned. He appeared in China. Gojo Satoru looked at Lan Shuyan. At this moment, Lan Shuyan's eyes became extremely cold, and the positive energy in his body exploded. Hey, Lan, stop exploding your positive energy. Gojo Satoru immediately took a step back. He really didn't expect that Lan Shuyan's technique, mirror round and perfect combination, would instantly transform his anger into such a terrifying positive energy. From this, we can see how angry Lan Shuyan was at this moment. He just showed up in your country and didn't do anything to your parents. It's better to say, he doesn't seem to get good things from your parents. When he said this, Gojo Satoru looked at Lan Shuyan with a strange look. Gojo Satoru's words made Lan Shuyan stunned for a moment. The positive energy and magic power on his body completely disappeared. What do you mean? Lan Shuyan looked at Wujo Satoru in confusion. Wujo Satoru didn't say much, but handed Lan Shuyan several photos. The photos showed various potholes on the ground and coke. What is this? Lan Shuyan was very confused. He really couldn't tell what the content of the photo was. Your mother's masterpiece. Gojo Satoru spread his hands. But Lan Shuyan was confused. What, mother? Lan Shuyan was even more confused now. In his memory, his mother, It seemed that he had no memory, but Lan Shuyan remembered that although his mother was in her 30s, she was not the kind of queen, but more like a young girl. Lan Shuyan had had the urge to ask his father countless times, have you been in prison for at least 3 years? But in fact, it was not, because his mother was the same age as his father. This is a video. Gojo Satoru handed his phone to Lan Shuyan. Lan Shuyan took it and clicked on the video that Gojo Satoru had opened. It was nighttime inside, and the scene seemed to be at a scenic spot. Lan Shuyan recognized this scenic spot because he had been there. And the picture seemed to be taken by a drone. Then Lan Shuyan was full of question marks because her mother appeared. Her mother had standard black hair, a white shirt, a white culottes, and white short boots. This small body and walking movements, at first glance, it is his mother, right? But what is she doing there? And she is hiding in a high place. Looking more carefully, Lan Shuyan also found that his mother was blindfolded with black gauze. Why? The protagonist's mother Yiluya. See this short review for the character setting. After a while, Lan Shuyan saw someone approaching again. It was Geto Shiu. He didn't seem to notice Lan Shuyan's mother. Then Lan Shuyan was dumbfounded, because his mother actually raised her arm directly, and her palm seemed to snap her fingers, and the space behind her seemed to be broken in the dark night. Oh my god, looking at flowers in the mirror. No. That's not the point. What the hell, my mom is also a sorcerer. I sat up in shock from my dying illness. The clown turned out to be me. But then Lan Shuyan continued to be stunned. Because conical shells emerged from the broken space. Then they all started to fly out, and the target was the direction of Sha Yuji. Sha Yuji in the video obviously felt it. The moment he raised his head, he actually released a large number of cursed spirits. But the shells pouring out of the broken space were endless. Explosions and roars came from the phone. Then, Lan Shuyan saw his mother's arm hammering the space on the other side. While the space was blown apart, a Gatling machine gun that was almost the same size as her was pulled out from it. She stood there and fired madly at the position of Sha Yuji. Because there were already Sha Yuji cursed spirits rushing towards her. But their bodies kept exploding in the Gatling's shooting. Next, Lan Shuyan was numb all over. The shells bombarded for 5 minutes. The Gatling machine gun fired for 4 minutes. Is there a shell warehouse in your space? When it completely stopped, everything below was razed to the ground. But Lan Shuyan's mother seemed to sense something. She raised her hand again and aimed at the sky above the center below. The space above was directly shattered, and then a Dongfang Express fell down. And then, Then there was nothing else. The whole screen went black. To be honest, Lan Shuyan is still confused now. Although Gojo Satoru's eyes were covered, he actually revealed an inexplicable speechlessness. Did Lan Shuyan's mother hit Geto Suguru? No. According to his calculations, in just 5 minutes, Lan Shuyan's mother spent nearly $300 million. Because the price of the Dongfang Express alone, Gojo Satoru knew should be more than $25 million. This is money, and Gojo Satoru can actually see that those shells seem to be blessed with positive energy, cursed power. If Gojo Satoru remembers correctly, to give modern weapons cursed power and turn it into an existence similar to a cursed tool, it will consume a lot of materials and money. In fact, I really didn't expect that your parents were also sorcerers. And this video was notified by your Chinese arbitrator. That is the special organization I mentioned to you before, an organization that knows about our magic world. That thing is yours, and all the funds are provided by your family. When Gojo Satoru said this, the corners of his mouth couldn't help twitching. It seemed that he had given Lan Shuyan suggestions before for nothing. The organization was all Lan Shuyan's own family, so how dare they touch him? Gojo Satoru knew the Lan family, but he had limited knowledge of this family. After all, they were not high profile. Lan Shuyan. Sigma degree surprised. Lan Shuyan was stunned. It seems that he lived to the age of 20 without knowing anything, right? It's outrageous. Wait, Lan Shuyan suddenly reacted and remembered his grandfather. Why didn't his grandfather ask others to handle the funeral, but asked him? Maybe his grandfather, his parents wanted him to go to Qingshan Ice Garden from the beginning. In other words, they should have known that Lan Shuyan had this special ability. Wait, that's not right. Why would the judge send this video to you? Lan Shuyan looked at Gojo Satoru puzzledly. They were expressing their dissatisfaction because Nozomi came from Japan, where he had caused some trouble and took away a special grade cursed spirit that they had suppressed. Gojo Satoru spread his hands, feeling really helpless. So, they are not going after my parents. Lan Shuyan reacted. Special grade cursed spirit, the same type as Chi Ben Li Shang. Lan Shuyan thought about it. Is Geto, controlled by Nozomi, going to China to find help? In other words, he still wants to carry out his plan. What's next? What happened to the noose in the end? Lan Shuyan didn't want to think about anything else, and looked directly at Gojo Satoru and asked. This was what Lan Shuyan wanted to know. Gojo Satoru shook his head. I don't know where the rope has gone, and there is no reply from the other side. But I think he escaped. Your mother's firepower bombardment, and the explosion of positive energy, will not be able to stop Nozomi from having more Shikigami. Instead, he will lose more cursed spirits. Gojo Satoru is very familiar with Geto Suguru's technique. Lan, listen carefully to what I say next. This world has consciousness. I have also been looking up information recently. I found a problem. When an extraordinary person appears in a place and breaks the balance between cursed spirits and humans, this consciousness will cause this place to give birth to something more powerful to balance the other side. And I am the one who breaks this balance. And you are also the existence that breaks this balance. Gojo Satoru looked at Lan Shuyan. Lan Shuyan also understood what Gojo Satoru meant. Lan Shuyan knew about this. Just like Gojo Satoru awakened the 6 eyes and infinity, breaking the balance between the cursed spirits and humans, so the real people appeared. They should be called natural disasters. Hanami should represent plants. Lugu should represent the earth. Tagore should represent the ocean. The real people should represent life. Although these few are not enough for Gojo Satoru to beat. And he himself seems to be the same existence as Gojo Satoru. In other words, the consciousness of the world will also give him a few opponents. Ding ding. Just when Lan Shuyan was about to say something, her cell phone rang. Lan Shuyan took it out and looked at it. The note was, Dear Mom. The note was changed by her mom. Hello, Mom, I have something to do. Lan Shuyan had just said a few words when her mother's voice came from the other side. Son, come out and pick up Mom. Mom is outside the gate of the college. Her mother Yiluya's voice was soft and gentle, not at all like a mother of a 20-year-old child. What the hell? Lan Shuyan was dumbfounded. Why did his mother come to Japan? Wasn't she very busy? You wait here, don't run around, I don't want to find you everywhere with a poor sense of direction. So Lan Shuyan hurriedly said to Gojo Satoru, and then went directly to the outside of the technical college to pick her up. Lan Shuyan's mother is a person with a poor sense of direction and has a very poor sense of direction. Lan Shuyan ran wildly. Otherwise, if his mother ran away, he would have to look for her everywhere. Now he hopes that she will bring an assistant with her. 10 minutes later, Lan Shuyan arrived at the gate of the technical college and saw a red flag car from a distance. A mature young woman in a black suit was standing upright on the road next to the back seat. When she saw Lan Shuyan coming, she immediately opened the door of the back seat. A woman who looked only about 1.5 meters tall, with long black hair, wearing the familiar white shirt and white culottes, and white boots on her feet got out of the car. She looked at Lan Shuyan, ran over directly, opened her arms and was about to hug Lan Shuyan. Son, Yi Luya ran over directly. This made Lan Shuyan's mouth twitch, and he pressed his mother's head with one hand, and her body stopped directly at an arm's length away. This made Yi Luya curl her lips and had to stop. Lan Shuyan reached out and held his mother Yi Luya's palm. But Yi Luya looked at the car and nodded. The female assistant over there understood what it meant, so she got in the car directly. Then the red flag car left directly. Lan Shuyan didn't care, and took Yi Luya's hand and walked into the Jujutsu High School. Lan Shuyan didn't dare to let go. If he let go, Yi Luya would definitely disappear in less than 10 seconds. Not long after, Lan Shuyan brought Yi Luya to the dormitory. Gojo Satoru had already left, and so did Fushiguro Miki. After all, Lan Shuyan had guests, and it was not appropriate for them to stay. So, where is our heirloom snow girl? As soon as he arrived at Lan Shuyan's dormitory, he looked around. He touched here and looked there, and it was obvious that he was still very interested in Lan Shuyan's current residence. Lan Shuyan covered his face. What the hell? Heirloom. Sure enough, it seems that except for him, everyone else in the family knows Qingshan Shuiji. It's outrageous. Miss Qingshan, Lan Shuyan called out, and a white light emerged from the back of his right hand. However, this time, Qingshan Shuiji's clothes were somewhat simple, and the color of her hair had changed. Her figure was not so exaggerated, but rather a traditional figure of Oriental aesthetics. She was also wearing a white hanfu and barefoot. See the short comment for the character design. Looking at Qingshan Shuiji, Yi Luya blinked. Then he looked at Lan Shuyan. Son, Mom has come from afar, won't you prepare some tea for Mom? Yi Luya crossed his arms and looked at Lan Shuyan with a smile. This made Lan Shuyan roll his eyes and walk out to the kitchen to prepare tea for Yi Luya. After Lan Shuyan left, Yi Luya put down his arms, then crossed his hands, with the right hand on top, and the hand gesture was to hold the palm of his hand between his chest and abdomen, and his right leg was bent back, his knees slightly bent, and he bowed his head to Qingshan Shuiji. The 29th generation granddaughter-in-law of the Lan family has met the 9th generation grandmother. Yi Lu Yi Xing is the ancient Chinese Wanfu ceremony. You recognize me, which proves that you have seen my portrait. Yes, someone from the Lan family branch has also inherited the flowers in the mirror. It's just that the characteristics of the spell used have changed. Qingshan Shuiji walked over with a smile and gently stroked Yi Luya's cheek. Her eyes were still as gentle as ever. She had just seen Yi Luya's battle in the field of life on the back of Lan Shuyan's hand with the flowers in the fog technique. Well, I can't use positive energy like that kid. My spell is not mirror circle and perfect match, but mirror shattered circle. I can only break the space and put various weapons in it. Being able to use it like that is also bound, and the price is that this body cannot grow, so I have always been like this girl. Yi Luya sighed helplessly. Flat, petite, and Lolita. It's so sad. Qingshan Shuiji chuckled. These kids really like to play with bondage. And the price they paid is really ridiculous, and it feels very helpless and reasonable. So, which one was taken away by the noose? Qingshan Shuiji asked about the main matter. She knew that Yi Luya came here for something. Kaifeng Yangwu. Yi Luya respectfully responded to Qingshan Shuiji's question. That's where the special level cursed ghost, Kai Lixie, is, right? Qingshan Shuiji reached out and took Yi Luyi's hand, leading her to sit on the sofa. After that, the noose went to Fengxiang County, Shaanxi, but I beat him back. Yi Luya nodded and responded to Qingshan Shuiji. She kept looking at Qingshan Shuiji because Qingshan Shuiji was really good looking. Chapter 91. Fortunately, only Kai Lexi was released. The other 4 places are guarded by family members. How is your side? The child is growing up well, right? After explaining, Yi Luya asked about Lan Shuyan again. Regarding Lan Shuyan's growth, Yi Luya really didn't pay attention, because when Lan Shuyan came here, he was completely handed over to Qingshan Shuiji. Because they really couldn't teach Lan Shuyan. They didn't dare to teach Lan Shuyan to play with restraints easily. Only Qingshan Shuiji could see the restraints of the soul, and could also let Lan Shuyan avoid many restraints that could not be touched. That child, Qingshan Shuiji covered her mouth and smiled. He uses restraints better than the other 2, and avoids costs in various ways. So don't worry, it should be okay this time. Qingshan Shuiji was really helpless about Lan Shuyan's various restrictions. But this also made Qingshan Shuiji feel that Lan Shuyan's thinking was very good. You just stay in China, try to calm them down if you can, but forget it if you can't. The child is here now. You can also pull the battlefield over. Those guys can only be killed by him, and only he can kill them. They couldn't do it before, so they could only seal it. Because even if others exorcise them, they will reappear in a certain period of time. Qingshan Shuiji stroked Yi Luya's head again. This made Yi Luya nod. By the way, does the family have materials for making spell tools? Send them all to him. There is a girl with him who possesses the construction technique. She should be able to make special grade spell tools with many characteristics. Qingshan Shuiji remembered something and instructed Yi Luya. This surprised Yi Luya very much. A sorcerer who can make special grade spell tools. Is it in time? I remember that it takes 10 months and 10 days to make a spell tool. The production of a spell tool takes time. It doesn't mean that it can be made immediately. Just do as I say. Qingshan Shuiji stood up and turned into a white light and disappeared through the window. At this time, Lan Shuyan just walked into the room with a tray and found that Qingshan Shuiji was not there. Where's Miss Qingshan? Lan Shuyan was a little puzzled, but he still took the tea and put it on the table in front of the sofa. The tea was Tigenian, and the snack was Chaoshan sesame soft candy. She went out for something. Yi Luya responded in a motherly tone. Oh, Mom, can you tell me what you are here for now? Lan Shuyan picked up the candy and ate it, looking at his mother. Qingshan Shuiji and he were very free, and Lan Shuyan would not restrict Qingshan Shuiji in any way. Nothing, just came to see you. You know, right, actually, our family is a family of magic. You have to be careful, Kai Lixie has been taken away. The opponent's technique is curse spirit manipulation technique. It may come to Japan to find you to deal with you. Yi Luya sat upright, looking at Lan Shuyan with a mother's weapon and eyes, and she was very serious and quite meaningful. But Lan Shuyan rolled his eyes. A mother who looks like a Lolita, no matter how serious she pretends to be a mother, really has no dignity, okay. When Lan Shuyan just crossed over, when he was still a baby who could see the world, he was shocked to see that his mother was a Lolita and could not understand it. Then for a period of time, he had never seen anyone like his father come to see him, which made him once doubt whether his father had gone in and squatted. But later he found out that his father was very busy. Are you not going to explain the rest to me? Lan Shuyan wanted to know something else, about his. You will know later. Yi Luya held the teacup in her small hands, blowing away the hot air, and then sipped the tea slowly. By the way, I heard from Miss Snow Girl that there is a girl around you who can use the construction spell. How is your relationship with her? Is it good enough for her to make a spell tool for you? Yi Luya asked Lan Shuyan curiously. There are very few spellcasters who can construct spells, and even fewer who can make high-level spell tools. It should be okay, I helped her, she should be willing to help me make it. Right, Lan Shuyan thought of the love in Fushiguro Miki's eyes today, and nodded. She should be willing to help him. That's good. I will ask the family to send the blueprints and materials for making special grade spell tools. Once those spell tools are made, they will be of great use to you. Okay, that's all I have to say. Mom has to go to the branch here and then she will return home. You have to get along well with Snow Girl. Yi Luya put down the teacup, then walked to the sitting Lan Shuyan in her boots, raised her hand to touch his head, but Lan Shuyan leaned back and she couldn't reach him. Looking at Yi Luya with a childish face and a motherly attitude, Lan Shuyan could only squat from sitting. Yi Luya smiled and stretched out her hand to touch Lan Shuyan's head. Yes, I got it, Mom, Lan Shuyan responded to Yi Luya. Yi Luya did not stay any longer, but took her to the gate of the college with Lan Shuyan holding her hand. The red flag car was already waiting here. They had just stopped somewhere else to wait for Yi Luya. The assistant got out of the car and opened the door for Yi Luya. Bye, Yi Luya waved to Lan Shuyan, and then the car door was closed by the assistant. Then, Xiao Lan, Mr. Yi and I will leave first. The assistant nodded slightly to Lan Shuyan. Thank you for watching over my mother. Lan Shuyan nodded. This assistant had been with his mother since he was born. He watched the assistant get on the passenger seat and the car drove farther and farther away. Lan Shuyan kept watching until he could no longer see. Mom should be fine, right? I couldn't feel the cursed power before, or I couldn't see the cursed power, so I didn't realize that it turns out that this assistant also has cursed power. It's outrageous. I'm the only one who doesn't know, right? Lan Shuyan looked up at the sky and shook his head. I don't know what Miss Qingshan said to my mother. Lan Shuyan walked back to his dormitory, but suddenly a white light flashed over, and it was Qingshan Shuiji who came back. She floated directly in front of Lan Shuyan, and her clothes turned into cheongsam again. Her figure also became what he saw at the beginning. I went to see Miki Fushiguro. She is willing to help you make the curse tool. That kid really likes you. Qingshan Shuiji smiled. This made Lan Shuyan roll his eyes. It wasn't his fault. Who knew it would turn out like this? The other party is a yandere. The next day, Lan Shuyan looked at the boxes of things in front of him and fell silent. It wasn't because there were a lot of things, but because these things were so strange. They should be the materials for making spell tools. And how should I put it? Some of them looked like waxed spell spirits. Really good. These materials. Fushiguro Miki was looking at the materials in front of her with a curious look. Today, Fushiguro Miki was wearing a beige sweater, a black long skirt, and black high heels. After all, October has already entered winter in Japan. Fushiguro Miki inherited the technique of Wan, and the memory of making cursed tools. So she still knows something about these materials. Yeah, it's really good. Should we say, it is worthy of being a family that has been passed down for thousands of years in this ancient country with a long history. Is this the head of the Yamada no Orochi? Gojo Satoru was also here, because he was also very interested in the materials used to make cursed tools. At this moment, he was holding a wax head that looked like the head of a great snake. That's not right, it's the incarnation of Shonglyu. But after it appeared in your Japan, you did call it Yamada no Orochi. Qingshan Shuiji was also nearby, and she took the wax snake head directly from Gojo Satoru. This head looked very much like a snake, but it had a single horn. The head should have been half the size of an adult's body, but now only the upper jaw was left, and the lower jaw was completely gone. Qingshan Shuiji directly stretched out her fingers to dig something out of the head and handed it to Lan Shuyan. Lan Shuyan was confused. What? Why does this look like a brain? But why is it the same size as a walnut? Swallow it. Qingshan Shuiji didn't say much, just concisely. Lan Shuyan was very resistant. Lan Shuyan, he can say ghosts, grass, snakes, and jellyfish. But he definitely doesn't have the hobby of eating cursed things, okay. Be good, be obedient. Qingshan Shuiji floated over, then hugged Lan Shuyan's neck from behind, speaking softly and gently. The voice was so gentle. But why did Lan Shuyan feel like a mother coaxing her child to take medicine? No, no, no. Although I am a pervert, I am not so perverted as to eat cursed things. Lan Shuyan shook his head frantically. This thing was as disgusting as a ball of phlegm on the surface. Really, be good. This will be very useful to you. Listen to me. Qingshan Shuiji still spoke softly. This is the main brain of the incarnation of Shonglyu, which is really useful to Lan Shuyan. No, no, no. I refuse. Only a fool would swallow this kind of thing. Lan Shuyan was still very resistant, very resistant. Yuji Itadori, who was not here, said he was offended. Swallow it for me. But at this moment, Qingshan Shuiji's tone changed directly, and she stuffed the walnut-sized brain of the incarnation Xiangliu into Lan Shuyan's mouth. Fushiguro Miki and Gojo Satoru on the side were full of question marks. What did they hear just now? It seemed that Qingshan Shuiji, who always looked gentle and intellectual, said, "Swallow it for me." Lan Shuyan didn't react for a while. When he reacted, the walnut brain had been stuffed into his mouth, and he felt his neck tilted, and then he was kissed by Qingshan Shuiji. She also used her magic power to push the cursed object in her mouth into her throat. Lan Shuyan blinked. He touched his mouth, and even swallowed it without feeling disgusted. Don't you know that 3 times is the limit? Qingshan Shuiji's red lips parted from Lan Shuyan's lips. Qingshan Shuiji also returned to her original gentle and virtuous appearance. After all, she was a descendant of a general family, so how could she really be like an ordinary lady from a noble family? She was still very fierce when she got angry. Looking at Qingshan Shuiji, who was still gentle and virtuous, Lan Shuyan was a little dazed. It seemed that he had just been intimidated by Qingshan Shuiji. The walnut brain that turned into Xiangliu is not poisonous, but it is the only one left in the world. It can give your body the ability to synchronize. Your body now has 2 types of techniques. You said before that it's not that you can't expand your domain, but that you can't expand your domain because of constraints. If you force it to expand, you will only have to pay a price. But you have 2 spells in your body, and both are in your hands, so you can't accurately unfold one of the fields. If you get other spells in the future, it will be even more difficult. Qingshan Shuiji's face revealed a very serious expression. And Lan Shuyan also thought about it. 2 spells. Wait, in other words, in addition to the mirror round match field based on his own spell, I can also perform the self-closed round wrap based on Wu Wei transformation. This is great. In other words, the technique I obtained through Water Moon can also be used in the field of the technique. But because I have 2 kinds of spells, the normal casting of the field will cause confusion and the spells cannot be cast. But the cursed object I just swallowed can help me solve a problem. But what does synchronization mean? Lan Shuyan understood it, but he really didn't understand the function of synchronization. Moreover, after he swallowed the cursed object, he didn't find that his body gained a strong curse power, nor did he have any other outstanding signs. Even when he observed his own soul, it was the same as before. Synchronization is to adapt to all techniques and be able to accurately control different techniques. Although the incarnation Xiangliu has 9 heads and 9 spells, only the main brain can actually activate the spells. It is auxiliary. And it just so happens that this brain is the main brain. It can help you accurately separate the flow of mana in the human body, inject it into the corresponding technique, and then expand the field with your imagination and understanding. Qingshan Shuiji patiently explained to Lan Shuyan. Lan Shuyan didn't need her to teach him about restraints, but for something like this, she really had to prepare it for him. So that's how it is. I haven't tried to use the domain before, so I really didn't notice it. Lan Shuyan looked at his hands. Gojo Satoru listened in silence. Lan, you haven't tried to use the domain, why are you sure you can use it? Gojo Satoru didn't understand. To deploy a domain requires timing and talent. And to perfect the domain, you also need to control the magic power, have rich imagination, and understand the characteristics. I just felt that I could do it, and then I was sure that I could do it. Lan Shuyan responded to Gojo Satoru's question very honestly. This made Gojo Satoru's mouth twitch. Is this a genius? Does a genius speak so arrogantly? It seems that I, Gojo Satoru, am also a genius, so it's okay. Is this a genius? He thinks he can expand his domain, so he is sure that he can cast his domain. It's ridiculous, isn't it? How long has he been in contact with the world of magic? It's like, I said the Milky Way is a river, so, the Milky Way must be a river. Next, Qingshan Shuiji left with Fushiguro Miki. Fushiguro Miki will help Lan Shuyan make the magic tools, while Qingshan Shuiji will speed up the completion of the magic tools. But, when Lan Shuyan thought of Fushiguro Miki holding her own cheeks with both hands, widening her eyes, and saying to him with a red face and grinning, "For Lan, I am willing to do anything," Lan Shuyan shuddered all over. Yandere, I'm really afraid that I will be killed by her one day. But why does it feel so exciting? Qingzan Shuiji is not here. Itadori Yujin and the others were taken out by Gojo Satoru for actual combat. Lan Shuyan was lying on the sofa in his room, bored. He had nothing to do recently, so he had been indulging himself. This can't go on any longer. This is the 4th time today. My body won't be able to take it if this continues. I have to go out and buy some food to replenish my energy. Decide and do it. I can't continue to indulge myself. Today is Yadogami, yesterday was Hanami, the day before yesterday was Yatsuki, and the day before yesterday was Yadogami's turn again. I really tried everything. 4 times a day, 4 times a day. But Lan Shuyan was also thinking, why not just get 7 Shikigami? Yadogami on Monday, Hanami on Tuesday, Yatsuki on Wednesday, Qingshan Shuiji on Thursday, Friday, Fushiguro Miki counts as 1. There are still Saturday and Sunday without a spirit selection. In the area where Yadogami was resurrected, Lan Shuyan went to take a shower directly, then changed out of the clothes of Jujutsu High School and put on the traditional Chinese-style outfit that he originally liked. Then he stepped on the black old Beijing cloth shoes and went out. Hua Yu. Walking on the road, Lan Shuyan called out Hua Yu. Hua Yu's skills have been getting better and better recently, and the hollow kinetic energy in the palm of his left hand has been used. To be honest, Hua Yu was really bitten all over by him. Because Hua Yu is really too well behaved, her green eyes are like seductive, even if she is quiet and silent, she is as charming as a fairy. Lan Shuyan smiled and reached out to hold Hua Yu's hand. They walked on the road like a couple in love. Jujutsu High School is still quite far from the city, and Lan Shuyan did not take a taxi, because it was very difficult to get a taxi, so he chose to walk slowly with Hua Yu. The environment in the suburbs was very quiet. There were basically no street lights along the way. When the sunset completely disappeared, the bright moon began to emerge. But as he walked, Lan Shuyan felt something was wrong. Because there was murderous intent in his sensing range. That's right, it was not hostility, it was murderous intent. This murderous intent penetrated into Lan Shuyan's bones, and it was a murderous intent that made his soul react. The soul is longing. This desire was something that Lan Shuyan felt strange. Just like a hunter who has been waiting for prey for a long time and began to get excited. What's wrong, Lan? Hua Yu clearly felt that something was wrong with Lan Shuyan, and her voice echoed in Lan Shuyan's mind. Hua Yu now called Lan Shuyan, that is, just, Lan. Be careful, there are enemies nearby. And the power of the curse I sensed is very strong. Lan Shuyan protected Hua Yu behind him. Hua Yu should be the weakest of the 4 natural disasters. Seeing Lan Shuyan protecting her behind him, her pretty face, which had never had any expression, smiled. This smile was very sweet. And at this moment, in the dark black ahead, a sturdy figure slowly appeared. It was a person with an insect head and a centipede tail extending from the neck. His body was also very sturdy, and it seemed as if he was covered with iron armor. The appearance is borrowed from Kai Lachier's centipede. This picture is from the internet. This is a cursed spirit. And it is a cursed spirit with extremely terrifying curse power. It is also a cursed spirit that Lan Shuyan has never seen in the original book. In other words, the current Lan Shuyan does not understand the opponent's technique at all. Even if he copies the mirror image of this cursed spirit now, he has no way of knowing the opponent's technique. But this does not affect Lan Shuyan. Because even if you don't know the opponent's technique, you can just bind these cursed powers into your own physical abilities. But Lan Shuyan just can't figure it out. Why would there be such a cursed spirit with such terrifying curse power? And it hasn't appeared in the anime. But soon, Lan Shuyan thought of something. Could it be that Geto Suguru brought it from China? Outrageous. I should have asked for accurate information at that time. But my mother changed the subject. Lan Shuyan had a toothache. But Lan Shuyan really blamed his mother wrongly. In Yi Luya's opinion, there was no difference between talking to Qingzan Shuiji and talking to Lan Shuyan, because in Yi Luya's opinion, Qingzan Shuiji was always with Lan Shuyan, so Qingzan Shuiji would also tell Lan Shuyan about the cursed spirit of China when appropriate. Yo, Sassy ignored me. At this time, Lan Shuyan saw a familiar person appear. It was Geto Summer Royal. But his appearance at this time was different from what he had seen before. because there were scars like burns on his hands, arms, and one side of his face, and these scars seemed to be reversed and repaired by the technique performed by Ghetto Summer Oil, but the flesh and blood that had just been repaired was burned back. It was like jumping back and forth between repair and injury. Is this the effect of his mother's technique? Lan Shuyan thought about it. If Lan Shuyan was not mistaken, the wounds on Ghetto Summer Oil had positive energy, and this positive energy was eroding Ghetto Summer Oil body. Flower God, have you become his Shikigami? It's really unexpected. Sha Yuji looked at Hua Yu behind Lan Shuyan. Although it was different from the beginning, Sha Yuji could still recognize it. But Hua Yu seemed to no longer recognize Sha Yuji, and just stared at Sha Yuji and the centipede vigilantly. Are you the container of this generation? At this time, Kai Lexi spoke. His voice was very hoarse. He walked slowly towards Lan Shuyan. Container. Lan Shuyan frowned. Mirror flowers and water moons. Kai Lexi continued to speak, and every time he took a step, his body would make a sound similar to the friction of bones. Although he was a monster, he walked in a square step. This made Lan Shuyan immediately draw out the Tien Ni Hoko and the soul release knife from the back of his hand. The target is me, Lan Shuyan muttered to himself. So that's it, you don't know who I am yet. The one who killed you was Kai Lixie. Kai Lixia's compound eyes were fixed on Lan Shuyan. The cursed power emanating from his body was like a mad demon dancing wildly, sweeping towards Lan Shuyan. After Kai Lexi finished speaking, Lan Shuyan also remembered something. Qingzan Shuiji had said before that the incarnation Shanglu seemed to be affected and had his main brain cut off because the holder of the first generation of Mirror Flower Water Moon fought with Kai Lexi. In other words, the cursed spirit in front of him was the Kai Lexi who had fought with the first generation at that time. Lan Shuyan thought it was outrageous. Doesn't this mean that the cursed spirit in front of him was also a cursed spirit from 1,000 years ago? Isn't this as outrageous as Sukuna? Just when Lan Shuyan was thinking about this, Lan Shuyan's eyes suddenly widened, because he suddenly found that Kai Lexi appeared behind him at some point. He had clearly used the curse power of the cursed spirit in front of him to bind the time. The time was no longer half an hour, but 10 minutes. But he couldn't use the spell of this curse power, because he didn't have the information of the spell and couldn't meet the conditions for binding, so he just used the curse power. But it directly compressed the time to 10 minutes, so it could make up for it. But even so, he didn't see clearly how Kai Lexi got behind him. But no matter what, Lan Shuyan didn't think he would lose in terms of physical ability. So he picked up the soul-releasing sword and chopped back, but what happened next still puzzled Lan Shuyan, because his soul-releasing sword chopped into nothing. Or rather, the soul-releasing sword pierced through Kai Lixia's body, as if it had chopped on a projection. Lan Shuyan felt a terrifying force coming from his back, which blew him away in an instant, and he bounced on the ground like a skipping stone, and finally hit a huge rock on the side of the road. The rock was cracked by his body. Ah! Lan Shuyan vomited a lot of blood. He felt that the spine in his back was broken. How is it possible? This is a body that can compare with the body of the sky and the tyrant. And what happened just now? Why did the soul-releasing sword penetrate through his body? And he was clearly behind me just now, but when I turned around to attack, it was my back that was attacked. Lan Shuyan widened his eyes and grinned ferociously. Hua Yu saw Lan Shuyan flying out, and she immediately ran to Lan Shuyan's side. But Kai Lexi suddenly appeared in front of Hua Yu. This made Hua Yu wave her arms immediately, and the branches exploded in front of her. But this attack still seemed to penetrate Kai Lexi's body without causing any damage. And Hua Yu, inexplicably, flew backwards, breaking her magic branch, and flew towards Lan Shuyan. This made Lan Shuyan's body swell immediately, and he hugged Hua Yu in his arms with one jump. Hua Yu's pink lips also spit out a lot of dark purple blood. Lan Shuyan could see that Hua Yu's spine was also broken. Oh, did you activate the positive energy recovery so quickly? What a terrifying reverse energy. Not far away, Sha Yuji praised Lan Shuyan's regeneration speed. Lan Shuyan's positive energy is a terrifying attack to the enemy, and it is a very terrifying regeneration energy for himself. Lan Shuyan ignored Sha Yuji's words. He looked at Kai Lexi not far away. What's wrong with this guy? His body is clearly in front, but the attack is transmitted from behind. Hua Yu, go back. Lan Shuyan looked down at Hua Yu in his arms. He had already injected positive energy into Hua Yu's body. With the addition of Hua Yu's own energy, his strength had been restored. Hua Yu nodded obediently, turned into green light and returned to the domain of Lan Shuyan's right hand. After Hua Yu was transformed by Lan Shuyan's hippocampus tissue and many memories were erased, the domain could not be expanded, and she was useless here. And Lan Shuyan never thought of using Shikigami to fight. She didn't know the strength of Qingshan Shuiji, but she was pulled into the domain by Geto Suguru Shikigami during the Juvenile Detention Center incident, and she came out quickly, which showed that she was not weak. But Hua Yu, Yatsuki, and Yatogami are too weak. They need their help to prove that Lan Shuyan is not strong enough, and if Lan Shuyan can't beat them, it's useless for them to come out, instead it will drag him down. And Lan Shuyan had vaguely understood what Kai Lexi's attack was all about. As a otaku who traveled through time and was also a novelist, his imagination easily allowed him to understand the current situation. So, Lan Shuyan grinned. But soon he was stunned again, because Kai Lexi was raising his palm, with his thumb already against the palm, and only 4 fingers standing. Then Kai Lexi stepped towards Lan Shuyan again. This time, he appeared behind Lan Shuyan again without Lan Shuyan noticing. Lan Shuyan directly held the Tien Ni bow in reverse and stabbed behind him. But this was a feint, and his soul-release knife slashed directly in front of him. If the figure is in front, the attack will come from behind. So, your true body cannot see the other side of the figure. Lan Shuyan slashed over, but this time not only did Tien Ni Boku penetrate Kai Lashia's figure, but the soul-release knife that slashed in front also slashed directly into the air and fell to the ground. This time, Lan Shuyan felt a terrifying force coming from the left side of his waist, which blew him away again. This time, Lan Shuyan was directly ejected hundreds of meters away. Lan Shuyan covered his left waist in the air. There was blood and flesh there, and he could vaguely see the ribs piercing through, because the bones on this side were all broken. There must be ribs piercing the internal organs inside. Lan Shuyan widened his eyes and grinned with a hideous smile. He adjusted his body shape and landed steadily on the ground. Then he threw Tien Ni Boku back to the realm of life, and then without hesitation, he penetrated his palm through the bloody left waist, pulled out the broken ribs inside and threw them away. Then a large amount of positive energy repaired his body again. Ha 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 ha, not bad, not bad. Don't look at me like this, I'm crazy too. This is the second time I got injured in battle, besides the time in the Juvenile Detention Center. Something you can't see, right? It's similar to Sukuna's slash, right? Lan Shuyan didn't feel any fear at all at this moment. He was so excited. A strong man must fight a strong man. Just like a man, he must fight Sukuna. Mirror flowers. Lan Shuyan once again made a mirror copy of Kai Lixie. This time, the mirror copy was still bound, and it was directly bound into the 5 senses. He didn't believe that ordinary eyes couldn't see it, so such a huge curse power bound into an insensate eye would not be able to see it. As long as it can be seen, Lan Shuyan is absolutely confident that he can cut Kai Lixie. Of course, this also proves that in fact, using only the curse power to bind and turn it into physical ability has disadvantages. After all, physical combat is not as fancy as the art, and it is easy to fall. Lan Shuyan stared at Kai Lexi intently. This time, Kai Lexi raised his palm again, and this time its fingers had changed from 4 to 3. This made Lan Shuyan frown again. After each strike he would raise his hand and show me. There were 4 before, now there are 3. To be honest, each of his attacks was powerful, but each one was just right. And his best option should be to kill me directly. His attack was enough to break my head. After all, I haven't adapted to it yet, but he didn't. In other words, his technique is conditional on killing people. The countdown of 5 fingers may be the last one, or after the 5 fingers are clenched into a fist, the person can be killed. Lan Shuyan grinned and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He stood up straight and locked onto the mirror image of Kai Lexi again. This time the mirror image was still binding Kai Lexi's curse power into his own 5 senses. His current physical state is the real, heaven and tyrant. A body without any curse power, super physical ability, super 5 senses. Lan Shuyan stared at Kai Lexi. Supervision can see many things that other sorcerers cannot see. But this time Lan Shuyan still did not see anything about Kai Lexi. Isn't it like the chakram of six paths Madara in Naruto? That's right. Just now Lan Shuyan thought that Kai Laxia's technique should be similar to the chakram of six paths Madara. But now it seems not to be the case. Or maybe it's actually similar, except that the shadow is invisible. No, regardless of the technique, the strength and ability are equivalent. It is impossible not to see with super five senses. Lan Shuyan said, and walked towards Kai Lexi. He wanted to find out, at the cost of enduring another blow. Kai Lexi also took action. This time, he did not appear behind Lan Shuyan, but appeared directly in front of Lan Shuyan. Lan Shuyan did not make any counterattack, but scanned the surroundings of his body with his naked eyes. Then, Lan Shuyan suddenly felt that his right side was hit violently again. His body flew out again, his mouth vomited blood crazily, his right waist was bloody, and Lan Shuyan even saw that his kidneys flew out, and the blood was scattered on the ground along the path he flew out. He still did not fall this time, but adjusted his body in the air, landed on his feet first, and slid on the ground for more than 10 meters before stopping. Lan Shuyan stretched out his hand and dug into the right waist, which was empty, and his palm only held the dripping blood. Hey, is this guy crazy? Normally, it is impossible to directly choose to actively accept this kind of attack again, right? Sugar Oil Gia watched from a distance, revealing a ferocious smile. He was really shocked by Lan Shuyan's madness. He could see that Lan Shuyan chose this behavior in order to understand Kai Lexi's technique, but this was not something a normal person could do. You know, every blow from Kai Lexi could make his bound tough body fly with blood and flesh. See clearly. Lan Shuyan activated the positive energy spell, and the wound on his waist recovered again. Lan Shuyan's recovery was different from that of Gojo Satoru, who could reverse the spell. He directly used the positive energy of the spell reversal plus positive energy to recover, and the soul of spell reversal in action transformation drove the body to recover, so the regeneration power was terrifying and unreasonable. Moreover, Lan Shuyan saw the attack just now clearly. Kai Lexi was stunned for a moment after listening to Lan Shuyan's words. But he raised his hand again, with only 2 fingers left standing. And Lan Shuyan directly raised the sky again. Nikoboko took it out, holding Tenakuboko in one hand and soul release knife in the other. Now that he had figured out the effect of Kai Laxia's technique, he started to fight back. This time, Lan Shuyan took the initiative to rush in the direction of Kai Laxia. Although his eyes were fixed on Kai Laxia, he was actually staring at something else. When he got close to Kai Laxia, the soul release knife in his hand chopped directly at Kai Laxia. Tenakuboko used the blind spot of his body to wait for an opportunity to move. When the soul release knife was about to touch Kai Laxia's body, Lan Shuyan lowered his head and kept his eyes on the shadows of the two of them. That's right, Kai Laxia's shadow moved. The shadow's arm directly hit Lan Shuyan's shadow. At this moment, Lan Shuyan suddenly stabbed the Tien Ni bow towards Kai Laxia's shadow. At the moment when Tien Ni bow stabbed the arm of Kai Laxia's shadow, the soul release knife that was slashing towards Kai Laxia's body also hit it directly. Puff! A wound appeared from the shoulder to the chest. A large amount of dark black liquid spurted out from Kai Laxia's body and splashed on Lan Shuyan's body. Kai Laxia quickly retreated, staring at Lan Shuyan in disbelief. His first attack, he was testing Lan Shuyan and found that he didn't know his ability. He knew that Lan Shuyan didn't know his ability at all, which means that Qingzan Shuiji, the Shikigami who accompanied 2 generations of Mirror Flower Water Moon holders, didn't tell him the information. And his appearance didn't draw Qingzan Shuiji out, which also proved that Qingzan Shuiji was not with him for some reason, so he wanted to kill Lan Shuyan with his own technique. But now, Lan Shuyan in front of him actually saw through his technique in a short time. And how did he interrupt his technique? Your technique is related to your shadow. Your body can interact with your shadow. When my soul-releasing sword is about to hit you, your real body is actually inside your own shadow, and you can control the shadow to attack my shadow. Besides, your power should not be great. The reason you were able to injure my body like that was because your shadow tore my shadow apart, and the damage also affected my body. Lan Shuyan carried the soul release knife on his shoulder and aimed the Tien Ni Hoko at Kai Laxia. So that's how it is. Is this weapon the Ten Nihoko, that the Japanese monk mentioned. It has the effect of interrupting any spell that is being performed. Kai Lachie grasped the wound on his shoulder with his hand. His eyes were looking at Geto Suguru, who was also watching them from a distance. Lan Shuyan didn't say anything. He could see clearly, thanks to his super strong senseless vision. He had just captured the behavior of Kai Lachie's shadow. But Kai Lexi directly wiped the palm of his hand that was pressing on his shoulder along the wound, and as his palm moved down, the wound actually recovered. Lan Shuyan was stunned. He can now see other people's souls because of the spell reversal in action transformation, not to mention that he has enhanced his 5 senses with restraints. And the soul is also a thing of the curse spirit, and it can accurately cut the soul with the soul-releasing sword. How can it be possible to recover so quickly? That's right. At this moment, what Lan Shuyan saw was that Kai Lexi and his soul had recovered together. Your comprehension ability is very good. Great insight too. Better than the first and second generations. The restraints are also very good. Binding the mirror image into physical abilities and 5 sense abilities. But the basic, mirror flower water moon, binding makes you unable to use the domain. Kai Lexi's hoarse voice echoed. Lan Shuyan still didn't understand why this happened. This guy can also see the binding of the soul. Are the cursed spirits from thousands of years ago so outrageous? Kai Lexi raised his palm again, this time still 2 fingers. Oh, even if the procedure is interrupted, there is no need to start over. Lan Shuyan immediately became alert. He already knew the opponent's technique, but why did the opponent still continue? Act again. This time it was Kai Lexi who took the initiative to attack. His cursed spirit body's physical ability seemed to be no less than that of Tianyu Tyrant, because he could use the cursed power directly on his body. This time, it was still the same as before. The soul release sword chopped towards Kai Lexi, and Tien Ni Boku was Kai Lexi's shadow. But this time, Lan Shuyan flew backwards again. The flesh and blood of his calf exploded directly, and his calf bones also shattered directly, but before he landed, Lan Shuyan recovered again. He couldn't understand why it didn't work this time. Ming Ni Boku did stab Kai Lexi's shadow. But it didn't interrupt Kai Lexi's technique. But before Lan Shuyan could figure it out, Kai Lexi had raised his palm again, and this time only 1 finger was left upright. This made Lan Shuyan think again. In other words, when Kai Lexi's shadow attacked his shadow, his body should have entered on existence, that is, the shadow became his real body, and the body became the shadow. Look at the shadow over there by Kai Lexi. Lan Shuyan was stunned for a moment. Because he found that there was a cut on Kai Lexi's shadow. A crack from the shoulder to the chest. As a time traveler and a novelist with a brain, he immediately thought of something. Transferring the damage to the body to the shadow. No, even so, it can't explain why the characteristic effect of Tien Ni Boku was not activated just now. Kai Lexi didn't give Lan Shuyan a chance to figure it out, and disappeared on the spot again, which made Lan Shuyan move directly in the same way. But this time, Lan Shuyan didn't approach Kai Lexi, but distanced himself from Kai Lexi. Lan Shuyan could see that Kai Lexi's shadow was like a demon with bared fangs and claws, always trying to tear his soul apart. Lan Shuyan was just moving, avoiding the approaching shadow of Kai Lexi. At the same time, he was thinking about why Tien Ni Boku was effective the first time and ineffective the second time. Based on my 9 years of experience in writing novels, there must be something special going on here. The ability to nullify the cursed tool. No, it worked the first time. The second time, he got used to the effect of the cursed tool. Similar to Moxu Luo's ability. By the way, Miss Qingshan Shuiji should be acquainted with my mother. She obviously sent me away that day, and then gave me the materials for making spell tools and asked Sue Mickey to make spell tools for me. Why do you suddenly want to make a spell tool for me? Try it. So, let's give it a try. Although I don't know what the effect of his technique is, but it requires this step. It should not be instant death, but some ability can only be activated after the conditions are met. If it doesn't work, I can just remove my mirror image, turn into an ordinary person without any magic power, and then kill myself. I can turn myself into a cursed spirit and then kill him. I have to say, Lan Shuyan is really crazy. If a magician is killed by an ordinary person, he will become a vengeful spirit. And it just so happens that when Lan Shuyan doesn't use his ability, he is just an ordinary person. No, I still have a domain. Lan Shuyan was stunned for a moment, because he had never thought of generating a domain since he fought with Kai Lexi. Lan Shuyan remembered, Kai Lexi just said that his mirror flower and water moon could not use the domain of the mirror image because of the restraint, and at that time he did not even think of using the domain. And at this moment, even though he had generated the idea of using the domain, he found that he had forgotten how to use the domain. Hey, what exactly is his spell? Lan Shuyan was a little confused. He immediately sorted out the current information again. The opponent's spell requires steps, and should have the ability to adapt to the characteristics of the spell tool, and the opponent does not have a domain. The fact that he does not have a domain, does it mean that the opponent thinks he can kill him without the domain? Or is the opponent afraid that he will not be able to kill him after using the domain, causing his body to enter the spell-fused state? Suddenly, Lan Shuyan grinned, forgetting to use the domain. Even if I remember to use the domain, I forget how to use it, or it makes me unable to use the domain. So, his technique is actually to force me into his rules, and only after his steps are completed can both of us expand our domains. Gradually, if this is the case, then the step condition is to attack my shadow 5 times, then the field condition will be opened. The other party should have known my current ability from the rope, and also knew that the holder of Mirror Flower Water Moon has a strong positive energy recovery ability. Tearing my shadow and causing my body to be injured will not kill me. No, or rather, he couldn't kill me. Because if he could kill me, he could have just hit my shadow's head first, and I would have died. But he didn't. He must also abide by the rules of his own technique, and be able to force the enemy to follow his rules and prevent them from expanding their domain. Then there must be conditions in place, such that he can harm the enemy but not kill him. Otherwise, it is very likely that all techniques will be invalid, and it may even lead to the invalidity of the results, and the enemy will recover his life. Only in this way can the benefits and costs of the rules be equal. Another one that knows how to use the binding technique, and this kind of binding is probably only for people who hold the Mirror Flower and Water Moon. Otherwise, a normal sorcerer would definitely die after taking so many attacks and having his body so broken. This kind of special rule effect is definitely not something that can be achieved by a simple spell. This is what Lan Shuyan could think of at the moment. He could actually see that Kai Lashia's soul was also bound, and he, who was stuck with the binding bug, also understood what kind of power and effect only binding could achieve. So, Lan Shuyan decided to give it a try. Once you participate in this kind of mandatory spell rule, you must abide by the rules. And a spell with rules means there are restrictions. The opponent will definitely not be able to kill him before the rules are completed. So, Lan Shuyan stopped and stared at Kai Lashie with wide eyes and a very ferocious smile. He stared at Kai Lashie intently. Bring it on. Please me. Finally, there is an opponent who is qualified enough for me to use my domain. Lan Shuyan has an extreme personality. Once he makes a decision, he will not hesitate. He feels that his guess is almost right. After removing the mirror image, only the time constraint is still on him. At the same time, he points the soul release knife at his neck. If there is a slight mistake, he will kill himself first. At the moment of death, he will copy the curse power of Kai Lashie, and then let this curse power curse himself into a curse spirit. Even if I die, I will turn myself into a curse spirit and continue to collect curse spirit mothers. In order to prevent people who don't understand the original setting from arguing with me, if a person with enough curse power is killed by an ordinary person, then the curse power and negative emotions will directly flow into the soul and become a cursed spirit. Just like when Zenin Maki's cousin Zenin Naoya was seriously injured, after Zenin Maki's mother killed him with a kitchen knife, he was directly transformed into a special cursed fetus by his own curse power and his own strong negative emotions. Although Lan Shuyan himself has no curse power, he can use his ability to copy the curse power of Kai Lashie while his brain is still active while cutting off his head, and use these curse powers and his obsession with the negative emotions of the cursed spirit to curse himself into a cursed spirit. Of course, this is just a hypothesis. But here we may also be able to speculate how Sukuna turned from a human body into the king of curses. The author speculates that according to Sukuna's personality, he will not choose to be killed by ordinary people, but use other ways to use the negative emotions generated by others to transform himself into the king of curses and gain 2 faces and 4 hands. As for why the power is concentrated on the fingers to become a cursed object, no one could kill him at that time, so the author thought that he volunteered and asked Nozomi to help him make his finger into a cursed object. Although he had prepared for the worst, Lan Shuyan was not without any ideas. He used his own restraints to confirm. He directly used the mirror flower, again to copy the power and spell of Kai Lashia's spell, and tried to activate the spell by understanding the opponent's spell to the minimum extent of his speculation. But, although the spell was successful, it only had the effect of swapping the body and shadow, and attacking the opponent's shadow, so that the shadow's damage was projected to the physical body. There was no such restriction area, steps and rules. In the restraints set by Lan Shuyan, as long as he knew the opponent's spell to the minimum, he could use the spell. In recent years, there was another bug that he had set just in case. That is, when he used the spell after knowing the opponent's spell to the minimum, the knowledge of the spell would be automatically obtained. So now Lan Shuyan is very sure that Kai Lashia's spell must be the kind of spell that is bound, because his mirror image cannot obtain the spell with the binding effect. And there is no so-called ability to adapt to the spell tool in the spell. Then this should be the characteristic of Kai Lashie, just like Gojo Satoru's special ability, 6 Eyes, which belongs to the physical constitution, and the mirror image cannot copy this. So, Lan Shuyan directly cancelled the mirror image. Kai Lashie had already approached, and this time Lan Shuyan stared at Kai Lashie's shadow. Its shadow suddenly looked like a black centipede, and its shadow tore off a piece of shadow, and Lan Shuyan's body was also injured at this time it was the stomach. Lan Shuyan's entire abdominal flesh seemed to be torn apart by something, and there was a recoil that blew his body away. The colorful intestines were directly exposed. But Lan Shuyan had been prepared for a long time. He stared at the trajectory of the shadow, which was to prepare positive energy in advance and heal the wound at the moment of injury. The colorful intestines had not fallen out yet. Lan Shuyan's stomach wound was directly healed. Falling to the ground, Lan Shuyan stared at Kai Lashie with a crazy smile. Because his guess was right. Because Kai Lashie stood in the same place and raised his palm at this moment, and his palm completely became a fist, but the form of the fist was different. All 5 fingers were gathered in the palm. This seemed to be the Taoist, 5 thunder fingers. The seal is here, the author took the photo himself. Domain unfolds Night Shadow Wei Yang Pavilion. Kai Lexi's hoarse voice echoed. At this moment, Lan Shuyan instantly copied Kai Lexi's mirror image again, then raised his right hand, with his index and middle fingers straightened, and his thumb pressing down on his ring and little fingers. This seal is exactly the same as the sword seal. The seal is here, the author took it himself. Because Kai Lexi's technique is related to shadows, Lan Shuyan did not dare to use his body without any magic power to try it in it. After all, his domain type should be similar to the effects of Gojo Satoru and Masamune, and should have nothing to do with whether the enemy has magic power. Domain expansion mirror palace coffin. Lan Shuyan also widened his eyes, with an extremely evil twisted smile on his lips. That's right, Lan Shuyan's seal is a single-hand seal, the same as Kai Lexi's. The previous opponent was really too weak. Even if Lu Hu can use the domain effect can't threaten him at all, just use the mirror binding and the mirror to watch the flowers. So, Lan Shuyan has never used his own domain. And just when the voices of both of them fell, the outer wall of the barrier that wrapped them did not emerge from behind them, but an open domain effect. The difference is, a large amount of black aura surged out from the feet of Kai Lexi. These auras were directly like the shadows of many centipedes intertwined together, and the shadows of all things were eaten up by them. And the buildings, flowers and plants that reflected the shadows, their shadows were swallowed up. In an instant, it disappeared as if it had never appeared. As for Lan Shuyan, his position did not change at all. Instead, an aerial black mirror palace appeared above his head. This attic was made entirely of black mirrors, and at its bottom, there were many chains hanging down, which tied up black Chinese coffins. But even in such a simple scene, even if the shadow from Kai Lexi rushed over, it could not swallow up the shadow in the area where Lan Shuyan was. Instead, it turned into something like liquid black water and was resisted. Kai Lexi frowned. This guy, his soul is obviously bound, why can he open the domain? Kai Lexi was puzzled. He was sure that the Lan Shuyan in his eyes was bound by a mirror image, and this mirror image constraint was blocked together with the domain ability. The Lan family's mirror round and perfect match technique has a very varied scope. Kai Lexi's voice was hoarse and deep, and it sounded like he was gritting his teeth. Sha Yuji, who was far away and outside the scope of both, was also very surprised. This little ghost suddenly appeared and joined the high school, and I noticed her. When I invited her Shikigami 1,000 years ago, she did not agree. Now that it has appeared in Japan, is it possible to master the field in just 4 months? What a monster! Suguru Jia showed a hideous fake smile. But then, when Lan Shuyan's domain effect was activated, Sha Yuji was completely unable to understand it. Because it was really too unbelievable. At this time, a black coffin hanging by chains under the Black Mirror Palace above Lan Shuyan's head suddenly fell and hit Lan Shuyan steadily. The strange thing was that it did not smash through directly, but wrapped Lan Shuyan in it like a phantom. The next second, the black coffin shattered directly like a mirror. Lan Shuyan looked down at his body. Well, this one is not bad either. Expand the domain. Lan Shuyan's eyes widened, and in the shocked and puzzled expressions of Kai Lixie and Sha Yuji who were watching the game, he expanded the domain again. The Lan family's mirror perfect match. Lan Shuyan smiled as he listened to Kai Lexi's words. He did not understand his family's magic formula. But he knew that his magic formula was bound to his eyes, so it must be different from his family's magic formula. Domain expansion mirror palace dark coffin. The coffins under the Black Mirror attic are all mirror images of enemies copied by Lan Shuyan. Every 6 minutes and 9 seconds, Lan Shuyan will randomly get a mirror image he has copied to act on himself. Moreover, it is an open domain, which gives the enemy a chance to escape as a price, and enhances the effect of his domain. No matter what mirror image is randomly selected, it can maximize the magic formula held by the mirror image. And just after Lan Shuyan cast the domain, a coffin under the Mirror Palace dark coffin fell, wrapped Lan Shuyan inside, and then completely shattered. Lan Shuyan looked at his hands. Well, it's not bad to get this mirror image. Lan Shuyan showed his vicious and ferocious smile. He put his hands together humbly, and bent his index and little fingers in his palms. Yama Heaven Seal. Domain expansion. Subdue demons and control the chef. As Lan Shuyan's voice fell, a shrine full of skeletons appeared behind him. That's right, Lan Shuyan activated his own domain and activated it again. What, isn't it impossible to use the copied mirror domain? I don't have it, don't talk nonsense. What does the enemy mirror copied by me, Lan Shuyan's mirror flower, have to do with the mirror held in my Lan Shuyan's domain? Hey, how is this possible? Why is it Sukuna's mirror image ability again? Suguru Jia, who was watching from a distance, was stunned for a moment. Domain within domain. What kind of operation is this? Can the same person use 2 domains at the same time? Suguru Jia knew that he could use different domains, one was his own domain, and the other was the domain of the body, but he couldn't use both at the same time. And Kai Lexi was also a little dumbfounded. He couldn't understand why a person could use 2 domains at the same time, and there would be no conflict with the previous domain. However, Kai Lexi also knew that when both parties used domains, the must-hit effect would be useless, and the next step would be to compete with their own techniques and experience. But the next second, Kai Lexi was surprised again. Because he found that his Shadow Sea was actually being pushed back. Or in other words, there were countless invisible attacks shattering his Shadow Sea. And the speed was very fast. This brat wants to erode my domain. Kai Lexi understood immediately. He was not as shocked as Sha Yuji at Lan Shuyan's domain within domain operation, because Incarnation Shongliu could do it. What he thought now was that no matter how he controlled it, his own domain could not resist the erosion of the other party's domain. Because the effect of Lan Shuyan's 2 domains directly stabilized his domain. If the domain was completely eroded, his body would fall into a state of spell melting, and he would also lose the divided curse power. So, Kai Lexi slowly retreated. He had already planned to retreat. It's not over yet. I am really good at using bugs. You came here to be immortal, but you still want to leave. Lan Shuyan formed seals with both hands again. The armor protection seal. This sudden seal killed all the Kai Lings. Why does this rhythm feel not good? Domain expansion, self-enclosed circle wrap. As Lan Shuyan's voice fell, a black barrier instantly enveloped Kai Lixie. But it was just a black barrier. There was only a dark space inside, and there was no such thing as holding hands. Because Lan Shuyan directly used the binding, the must-hit technique of this domain expansion was turned into a technique to maintain the hardness of the barrier, so it was not so easy to break from both the outside and the inside. At the same time, Lan Shuyan also narrowed the domain range of subdue the demon and the chef to the same range of this domain space. Since Lan Shuyan started playing with binding, he has been thinking about how to use his own domain, what kind of effect his ability can materialize, and how to improve the effect. Finally, Lan Shuyan came to a conclusion. Domain expansion relies on the understanding of the technique, his own talent, rich imagination, and huge general's cursed power. So, Lan Shuyan learned Sukuna's open domain to obtain a more powerful effect. And after obtaining the technique of inaction transformation, Lan Shuyan thought of conditionally binding the domain expansion of inaction transformation, and became it as a barrier for your own domain to prevent the enemy from escaping. In this way, the mirror palace coffin is an open domain, and the mirror image in the domain coffin is maximized. For example, the damage of Sukuna's mirror image technique is increased, and the increase effect is doubled when the same magic power is activated, while the self-closing circle is a pure barrier without the effect of the technique, which can trap the enemy and is so strong that it cannot be easily broken from inside or outside. Of course, if you didn't get Sukuna's mirror image just now, but got leak coral or other mirror images, Lan Shuyan, it will also expand the mirror domain and set constraints to become an open domain. Lan Shuyan is playing exorcism of Kai Lixie. He doesn't want to transform Kai Lixie into a passive existence. Although the special grade is rare. But Lan Shuyan doesn't really ignore Qingzhan Shuiji's feelings. They that Qingzhan Shuiji mentioned before should refer to the existence of Kai Lixie. Since Qingzhan Shuiji hates them, Lan Shuyan will also hate them. No matter what, Qingzhan Shuiji really dotes on him. He is also willing to do something for Qingzhan Shuiji. So, let me slaughter you unilaterally. Lan Shuyan tilted his head. Just as Qingzhan Shuiji said, after swallowing the walnut brain of Incarnation Shongliu, he could really accurately cast the domain without conflict. Fortunately, Qingzhan Shuiji reminded him, otherwise he really couldn't play the domain like this today. He had already understood the process of the flow of the curse power after casting the domain for the first time. If there was no synchronization to accurately inject the curse power into the exact position of his arm, the two domains of his art would really conflict and could not be directly deployed. Kai Lixie's sighed. He listened to Lan Shuyan's words that he was sure of him, and he seemed to be unconcerned. He knew that his domain could not resist for long. I feel your spell is very good, please offer it to me with gratitude. Lan Shuyan changed the solution of the domain to 8, which is a slash that changes according to the power of the curse. He attached a lot of curse power to all the slashes. The result was that the curse power copied by Lan Shuyan was directly used up. After all, the mirror image obtained in the domain only has spells, but no curse power. So Lan Shuyan launched a copy again towards Kai Lixie. He copied the curse power and spell on his body again. From this, it can be seen that Sukuna's curse power is still very terrifying. At least from the mirror image of Kai Lixie, the curse power here is not enough to sustain Lan Shuyan's continuous launch of tens of thousands of 8 slashes. Kai Lixie watched his domain being instantly eroded to a radius of 1 meter around him, and he had no fear at all. This time, you win. Kai Lixie's hoarse voice came out. The next second, his domain was completely eroded and covered. Kai Lixie's body was instantly broken into countless pieces, with only one head intact. Lan Shuyan lifted Sukuna's domain, otherwise Kai Lixie's entire head would be cut off. How could he obtain the opponent's technique? As for Geto Suguru outside the barrier, his brain is about to explode. Fine. Is this how you expand the field? This is ridiculous. It's even more ridiculous than my brain-changing brain. Lan Shuyan must meet 1 point to obtain the enemy's spell. That is to use Water Moon to activate the corresponding person in the mirror image to kill the opponent. Crack. The barrier is broken. The demon-suppressing shrine is shattered. The mirror palace coffin is also shattered. Only Lan Shuyan and Kai Lexi's head are standing. Lan Shuyan directly activated Water Moon and used Kai Lexi's spell without any nonsense. Kai Lexi's spell is called Shadow Swallowing Spell, which is the information Lan Shuyan obtained. So, Lan Shuyan controlled his own shadow to attack the shadow of Kai Lexi's head. The shadow instantly tore the shadow of Kai Lexi's head into pieces, and Kai Lexi's head also turned into flesh and blood and exploded. But Lan Shuyan frowned, because Lan Shuyan did not feel that he had obtained the opponent's spell. But he had obviously bound Water Moon, and paid a price, but why did he not succeed? Wait, what he just said was, this time, UWN. Lan Shuyan frowned and thought, does that mean he will have another chance next time? Lan Shuyan understood in an instant, so the Kai Lixie here is not the real Kai Lixie. I see, no wonder his cursed power is not as strong as Sukuna's. Although the curse power is greater than that of the four great disasters, and the amount is like a group of demons dancing wildly, it is obviously not comparable to Sukuna. The curse power of a cursed spirit that has lived for thousands of years cannot be so small. Lan Shuyan looked around, and Sha Yuji was gone. This made Lan Shuyan more certain of his guess. Otherwise, Sha Yuji should have attacked him now. After all, after using the field expansion, the spell will enter the state of melting, and that is the best time to deal with him. Well, I guess he is also afraid of uncertainty. After all, what does the mirror's spell fusing have to do with me, Lan Shuyan? My own mirror palace coffin and self-closing round wrap techniques are in my hands, so it doesn't matter if the techniques are broken. Because there is still a technique field in my brain that has not been deployed. Lan Shuyan knocked on his brain. Lan Shuyan's techniques all have their own separate channels for injecting magic power under synchronization, so he is not afraid of all the techniques suddenly breaking at the same time. As for the undeployed technique, it was originally reserved for dealing with Geto Suguru. Who knew he would run away? What a wasted evening. Although the whole process lasted less than 10 minutes. That's right. In fact, the whole battle lasted less than 10 minutes. Why do you know? Because at this moment, the time constraint that Lan Shuyan used the power of the Kai Lixie spell has just expired. Looking up at the sky, Lan Shuyan discovered that an area here was actually covered by a tent. Strange, wrapped in a tent, and at night, why is the shadow so clear? When fighting with Kai Lexi, Lan Shuyan was puzzled. In the dark, the shadow is not very clear, but after Kai Lexi started fighting with him, the shadows of all the scenes nearby were very clear. Forget it. I guess it was the effect of Kai Lixie's technique. And this time he should be trying to test my intelligence. But what good is it to get the information? Maybe I can come up with something new next time. Although he said so, Lan Shuyan did not underestimate Kai Lexi. Just now, he was only trying to figure out the opponent's technique and suffered a little loss. The rest was basically a complete crushing. But if a being that is not the original body has this level of ability, then the original body must be no weaker. Suddenly, Lan Shuyan was stunned for a moment. Because he found that the flesh and blood of the body of Kai Lixie, which was chopped into hundreds of pieces, did not turn into ashes and disappear. This made Lan Shuyan walk over to take a look, and then frowned. Because this was not the body of a cursed spirit, but a human body. And judging from the broken clothes, it seemed to be a sorcerer. Using the sorcerer's body as a form of incarnation, similar to the spirit summoning spell. Lan Shuyan murmured to himself. At this moment, the sky suddenly echoed with a sound similar to a balloon explosion, which made Lan Shuyan look around and found that Qingshan Shuiji was floating towards her at a very fast speed. Blue, are you okay? Qingshan Shuiji directly held Lan Shuyan's cheeks with both hands. Her voice was urgent, but also mixed with worry. The blue eyes seemed to be hazy. This made Lan Shuyan laugh carelessly. Sure enough. The arrogant snow girl wife really cares about her, and she is about to drop her little pearls. I'm fine. Isn't Miss Qingshan helping Jin Meiji make a special grade spell tool? Why are you here? Lan Shuyan raised his hand and held Qingshan Shuiji's hand. I felt the power of Kai Lixie's curse, and I went to look for you but couldn't find you. Then I saw someone lowering a tent, so I immediately rushed over here. But the tent is a little difficult to break through. The effect should be that it is easy to get out from the inside, but difficult to get in from the outside. Qingshan Shuiji breathed a sigh of relief and explained in a gentle voice. Then she looked around and frowned, and found that this place had become different from before. Many roadside buildings and fences, as well as grass and trees, were gone. Who did you fight? Kai Lixie. It's the vengeful spirit with a centipede tail on its head. Qingzhan Shuiji continued to ask Lan Shuyan. Lan Shuyan nodded and told Qingzhan Shuiji about the battle just now. This made Qingzhan Shuiji frown. Lan Shuyan felt puzzled. Although Kai Lixie was not the real body, Qingzhan Shuiji should not show such an expression. Shadow swallowing spell. Are you sure the enemy you are fighting is a vengeful spirit with a centipede on the back of its head? Qingshan Shuiji couldn't figure it out, so she just asked directly. Because what Lan Shuyan just expressed was very similar to Kai Lexi, but not quite like Kai Lexi, because the abilities were not similar. But the spell is innate and cannot be changed. Yes, it even said that it is Kai Lixie. Lan Shuyan didn't quite understand Qingzhan Shuiji's behavior. After all, it claimed to be its own, so it couldn't be someone else impersonating it, right? According to what I know, Kai Lixie's technique should be the shadow driving spell. But the ability you mentioned to resist cursed tools is right. As long as Kai Lixie is hit by a cursed tool once, he will be able to adapt to the characteristic ability of the cursed tool. For example, your Amagi Hoko, as long as he is hit by each other and triggers the interruption characteristic of the spell being activated by Amagi Hoko, then the characteristic of the second Amagi Hoko will be invalid. Or, in fact, in order to deal with the holders of Mirror Flower Water Moon and Mirror Viewing Flowers, the 5 disasters of China all have physiques that adapt to the cursed tools. That's why I thought of asking little sister Sumiki to help you make more cursed tools. Qingshan Shuiji floated behind Lan Shuyan, put her arms around Lan Shuyan's neck, and buried the back of Lan Shuyan's head again, while her cheek was against Lan Shuyan's head, explaining softly. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.